The morning sun climbed over the eastern ridges of the Montana mountains, casting long shadows across the sprawling Rockwell Advanced Tactical Center. Colonel William Iron Bill Harrington stood motionless on the observation deck, his weathered hands gripping the railing. At 65, his tall frame remained as straight as the day he'd graduated from West Point. His face, lined with age and experience, showed the weight of decades of service, but his steel blue eyes retained their piercing intensity. Below him, 5 M1 Abrams tanks rolled across the training ground, kicking up dust clouds in their wake. The familiar rumble of their turbine engines resonated in his chest, a feeling that had become as natural to him as his own heartbeat over his 40-year military career. Still the most beautiful sound in the world, he murmured to himself. Harrington checked his watch. The Secretary of Defense and Joint Chiefs would arrive in less than 3 hours for the annual demonstration. After 30 years of service in armored divisions, including commanding a tank battalion during Operation Desert Storm, Harrington had spent the last 5 years shaping the Rockwell Advanced Tactical Center into the premier tank warfare training facility in the United States. "Colonel, the final briefing is in 15 minutes. Major Thomas Thunder Davis approached from behind, his footsteps purposeful on the metal deck. At 45, Davis was Harrington's right hand, a decorated tank commander who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He'd lost his left eye in an IED attack outside Kandahar. The black eye patch he wore a permanent reminder of the cost of war. "The crews are looking sharp, Thomas," Harrington said without turning. "But Mitchell's gunner on Tank 3 is still overcompensating on the Traverse. Have him run another simulator session before the demonstration." Davis made a note on his tablet. "Already scheduled, sir. Captain Mitchell is personally working with him." At the mention of Captain Sarah Mitchell, Harrington finally turned. The young officer had quickly become one of his most valued team members after joining the center 2 years ago. At 35, she was brilliant, dedicated, and possessed an almost supernatural understanding of the Abrams fire control systems. She reminded Harrington of his late wife Jennifer in many ways. The same determination, the same refusal to be intimidated in what was still largely a man's world. "Good. And our VIP security protocols?" "Sergeant Major Jackson has triple-checked everything. The Secretary's team sent their final requirements an hour ago. We've accommodated all of them." Harrington nodded. Raymond Rock Jackson was the most thorough NCO he'd ever worked with. After 30 years maintaining and operating tanks, the gruff 55-year-old Sergeant Major could diagnose a mechanical problem just by listening to an engine, and his attention to detail was legendary. "Then we're as ready as we'll ever be, Harrington said, and let's make today count." As they walked toward the command center, Harrington felt the familiar twinge in his right knee, an old injury from when his tank had hit a mine in Iraq. The doctors had offered surgery, but he'd refused. The pain was a reminder, a connection to the men he'd commanded, especially those who hadn't come home. The command center hummed with activity. Massive screens displayed real-time feeds from across the 200-square-mile training grounds. Jackson stood before one of them, his broad shoulders squared as he directed a team adjusting security camera feeds. "Morning, Colonel," he said without looking away from the screen. "Weather report says clear skies all day. Wind at 5 knots from the northwest. Perfect conditions." "Thank you, Rock," Harrington replied, using the nickname Jackson had earned after surviving a direct hit to his tank in Desert Storm. The crew had found him unconscious but alive, the only survivor, amid the twisted metal. Captain Mitchell approached, her dark hair pulled back in a tight regulation bun, her uniform impeccable as always. "The new targeting algorithms have been uploaded to all demonstration vehicles, Colonel," she reported. "The response time improvements are significant." "Good work, Captain," Harrington said. "Your modifications to the stabilization system have impressed even the engineers at General Dynamics." Mitchell's expression remained professional, but Harrington could see the pride in her eyes. He had taken a chance bringing her to Rockwell after she'd clashed with commanders at Fort Hood. Her brilliant technological mind had been wasted there, stifled by bureaucracy and outdated thinking. At Rockwell, she had flourished. The briefing proceeded efficiently, each officer reporting their section's readiness. Harrington listened intently, occasionally asking a pointed question or offering a suggestion. When it concluded, he remained seated as the others filed out. "Something on your mind, Bill?" Davis asked, staying behind. Harrington stared at the tactical display showing the positioning of their demonstration forces across the training grounds. "Call it an old man's instinct, Thomas. Something doesn't feel right today." Davis pulled up a chair. "Your instincts have saved my life more than once. What are you seeing? Harrington shook his head. Nothing specific, just an uneasiness. The secretary's visit was announced on too short notice. Security protocols feel rushed. We've run this demonstration dozens of times, Davis reminded him. Not with the Secretary of Defense, the Army Chief of Staff, and 3 congressmen on the observation deck. Harrington zoomed in on the map. Have Jackson double the perimeter patrols. And I want our reserve tanks fueled and ready, not just the demonstration units. You expecting trouble from somewhere in particular? Harrington's mind flashed to a news report he'd seen the previous week. A National Guard armory in Idaho had been raided, weapons and equipment stolen. The authorities had been tight-lipped about exactly what was taken. Just covering all bases, Harrington replied. And Thomas, keep this between us. No need to alarm the team or our visitors. As Davis left, Harrington turned to his computer and typed in his security credentials. He accessed the classified intelligence briefings he still received due to a security clearance. The armory raid was more serious than the news had reported. Among the items taken were components for 5 M1 Abrams tanks that had been in storage. The tanks had been partially decommissioned, but in the hands of someone who knew what they were doing. His phone buzzed with a message from his son, Major Robert Harrington. It was brief. Can't make it for your birthday next week. Deployed classified location. Will call when I can. William felt a familiar mix of pride and disappointment. Robert had followed him into the Army, but had chosen Special Forces rather than armor. Their relationship had been strained since Jennifer's death from cancer 10 years ago. Robert had wanted William to retire, to spend more time with his mother in her final months. William had tried to explain that his command couldn't be abandoned during the Iraq surge, but the argument had created a rift that had never fully healed. The elder Harrington set the phone down and returned his attention to the security reports. Something in them nagged at the edges of his consciousness, a pattern trying to emerge. He accessed the personnel files of the Joint Chiefs Security Detail, scanning the names. His eyes stopped at one, Lieutenant Marcus Blackwood, Jr., the son of his former comrade. Colonel Marcus Blackwood, Sr. and William Harrington had served together in Desert Storm, commanding sister battalions in the same armored brigade. They had been like brothers, fighting side by side as they led the charge into Iraq. But something had changed in Blackwood after his son, a promising young officer, had been killed in a classified operation 3 years ago. The official report claimed the young Blackwood had died in a training accident, but rumors suggested otherwise. Marcus Sr. had demanded answers, going all the way to the Joint Chiefs. When none were forthcoming, he had become increasingly bitter and withdrawn. He had retired abruptly a year ago, dropping out of contact with his former friends and colleagues, including Harrington. William had tried to reach out multiple times, but his calls and messages went unanswered. The last he'd heard, Marcus was living in a remote cabin in Idaho, not far from the raided armory. The thought sent a chill through him. No, it couldn't be, Unbeg. Marcus was a patriot, a decorated officer. Regardless of his grief and anger, he would never, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Harrington picked up his phone and called a number few people had access to. General Westmoreland's office, answered a crisp voice. This is Colonel William Harrington. I need to speak with the general immediately. Authentication code Sierra Tango 73 Alpha. There was a pause then. One moment, Colonel. General Westmoreland had been Harrington's commander during Desert Storm and now served as Director of Military Intelligence. If anyone could confirm or allay Harrington's suspicions, it would be him. Bill, this is unexpected, came the general's voice, deep and authoritative even after all these years. Sir, I apologize for the direct contact, but I'm concerned about today's demonstration at Rockwell. The Secretary and Joint Chiefs will be here in, he checked his watch, less than 2 hours. Have you received any intelligence about threats, specifically anything involving Marcus Blackwood? The silence on the other end lasted several seconds too long. How did this come across your radar, Bill? Westmoreland finally asked, his tone carefully measured. I noticed his son is assigned to the Joint Chiefs Security Detail today. Given Marcus's recent difficulties in the armory raid in Idaho, I became concerned. Lieutenant Blackwood was reassigned last week, Westmoreland said. He's not on the detail coming to Rockwell. Then who approved the manifest I'm looking at right now? Harrington demanded, his unease growing. Because it clearly shows him as part of the advance team that arrived last night. Another pause. Bill, lock down Rockwell. Now, we've been tracking chatter about a domestic terror group called Liberty's Vanguard. Intelligence suggests they're planning something significant, but we had no indication it would be at Rockwell. And Marcus? We believe he's their leader, Westmoreland confirmed grimly. After his son's death, he became convinced the government sacrificed his team in a covert operation gone wrong. He's been recruiting former military personnel, particularly those who served under him or have grievances against the administration. Harrington felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. Marcus, his brother-in-arms, planning an attack against the military leadership. I'm dispatching a counterterrorism team, but they won't reach you for at least 90 minutes, Westmoreland continued. Until then, the call cut off abruptly. Simultaneously, the lights in the command center flickered. Harrington tried to reconnect, but there was no signal. He moved quickly to the center's main communications panel and found all systems offline. The emergency backup should have kicked in automatically, but nothing happened. Davis, he shouted, moving toward the door. As he reached for the handle, the door swung open. Davis stood there, his expression grim. We've lost all external communications, sir. Radio, satellite, internet, everything. The backup systems aren't responding. It started, Harrington said. We have a breach. Liberty's vanguard, led by Marcus Blackwood. To Davis's credit, he didn't waste time with disbelief. Orders, sir? Implement Fortress Protocol. All demonstration tanks are to be secured immediately. Get Mitchell and Jackson. We need to. The building shook with a distant explosion. Both men rushed to the window. A plume of smoke rose from the eastern perimeter. They're creating a diversion, Harrington realized. The real target is the VIPs. When do they land? 20 minutes, Davis replied, already moving toward the weapons locker. Chopper pad on the south side. Too late to warn them off, Harrington muttered, accepting the sidearm Davis handed him. He checked the magazine and chambered around. We need to secure that landing zone. They hurried down the corridor toward the motor pool. Jackson met them halfway, already in combat gear, an M4 carbine in his hands. Perimeter sensors are down, he reported, but I've got visual confirmation of multiple vehicles breaching the east fence. Military style, moving in tactical formation. How many men do we have ready to fight? Harrington asked. 32 on duty, sir, not counting the tank crews. I've already ordered them to defensive positions. Not enough, Davis said. If Blackwood is leading this, he'll have planned for our standard response. Harrington nodded grimly. He knows this facility almost as well as I do. He consulted on its design. They reached the motor pool where 4 Humvees stood ready. Mitchell was already there distributing weapons to a group of soldiers. Captain, what's our vehicle status? Harrington called. 5 Abrams on the demonstration field are combat ready, sir. 2 more in Maintenance Bay 3 are operational but not fully armed. And our secure communications? Still down, Colonel. Someone uploaded a virus into our systems last night. It's sophisticated, military grade. Harrington felt a cold certainty settle over him. An inside job. Mitchell's eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her composure. That would explain how they bypassed our security protocols. The question is who, Davis muttered. Before anyone could respond, the facility's emergency siren began to wail, its piercing tone echoing across the complex. That's the chemical attack warning, Jackson said, frowning. But the sensors haven't triggered because there is no chemical attack, Harrington realized. They're using our own protocols against us. Everyone will head for the underground shelters, exactly where Blackwood wants them. He keyed the radio to the emergency channel that all personnel monitored. It was short range, but it would reach across the facility. All personnel, this is Colonel Harrington. Disregard shelter protocols. We are under conventional attack. Implement Fortress Protocol immediately. This is not a drill. Whether anyone received his message was unclear. The chaos had already begun. Through the motor pool's open doors, they could see personnel running in all directions. Some headed for shelter, others toward defensive positions. Without clear communications, the chain of command was fragmenting. Sir, a young corporal burst into the motor pool. Armed personnel have entered the main administration building. They were wearing our uniforms, but I didn't recognize any of them. How many? Jackson demanded. At least 20 that I saw. They're clearing rooms, looking for something or someone. Harrington made his decision. Davis, take half our available men and secure the VIP landing zone. Delay the secretary's arrival if possible. Evacuate them if they have already landed. Jackson, get our demonstration crews to their tanks and form a defensive perimeter around the main complex. And you, sir? Davis asked, though he already knew the answer. I'm going after Blackwood, Harrington said, checking his weapon again. Captain Mitchell, you're with me. We need to restore communications. As the others moved to carry out his orders, Harrington pulled Mitchell aside. Sarah, I need absolute honesty. Is there anyone on your tech team who could have facilitated this breach? Someone with the skills to bypass our security and plant that virus? Mitchell hesitated, her expression troubled. Sir, we all have the technical capability. The question is who would have the motivation? What about you, Captain? Harrington asked directly, watching her eyes. Where were you last night? To her credit, Mitchell didn't flinch. In my quarters until 2200. Then I was called to the server room to address a system anomaly. Lieutenant Parker and Sergeant Willis can confirm my whereabouts. Harrington studied her a moment longer, then nodded. I need to trust someone, and right now, that's you. Let's move. They exited the motor pool through a side door, moving swiftly but cautiously toward the main administration building. The sound of sporadic gunfire echoed across the complex. Colonel, may I ask why you suspect it's Blackwood? Mitchell asked as they took cover behind a maintenance shed, checking the path ahead. Because Marcus Blackwood was the best strategic mind I ever knew, Harrington replied grimly. Because his son died under questionable circumstances, and the government stonewalled his investigation. And because if I were going to strike at the heart of military leadership, this is exactly how I'd do it. They moved forward again, staying low and using buildings for cover. Ahead, the 4-story administration building loomed, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun. Through the windows, they could see figures moving inside. The main server hub is in the basement, Mitchell said. If we can reach it, I might be able to restore communications or at least get a message out. That's our primary objective, Harrington agreed, but we need to be prepared for heavy resistance. Blackwood will have secured it early. They approached the building's rear entrance, used primarily by maintenance staff. The electronic lock had been disabled, the door slightly ajar. Stay behind me, Harrington whispered, drawing his sidearm. He pushed the door open slowly with his foot, revealing a dimly lit service corridor. Emergency lights cast an amber glow over the concrete walls. They entered cautiously, closing the door behind them. The building seemed unnaturally quiet. Stairwell to the basement is 30 meters ahead, Mitchell whispered, pointing down the corridor. They moved silently forward, every sense alert. Harrington felt the familiar calm of combat settling over him, the heightened awareness that had kept him alive through 3 wars. The sounds of conflict outside faded away as he focused entirely on the immediate threat. They reached the stairwell door without incident, which only increased Harrington's unease. This was too easy. Wait, he whispered, holding up his hand as Mitchell reached for the door. It's not like Marcus to leave an objective unguarded. He knelt and examined the door's hinges, then the frame. Near the bottom, almost invisible against the dark metal, he spotted a thin wire. Booby trap, he murmured. Classic field expedient, pressure release trigger. Open the door and something goes boom. Mitchell's eyes widened. Can you disarm it? Not without proper equipment. We need another way down. There's a maintenance elevator at the end of this corridor, Mitchell offered. It connects all levels for moving heavy equipment. Harrington nodded and they continued down the hallway. The elevator doors stood open, the car waiting, its interior dark. Power's been cut to the elevators, Mitchell observed, but the shaft will still connect to the basement, Harrington replied. He approached cautiously and peered down the shaft. The elevator car was stopped 1 level down. We can use the maintenance ladder on the wall. He holstered his weapon and swung himself into the shaft, finding the rungs of the ladder built into the wall. Mitchell followed, her movements almost as fluid as his own. They descended past the stalled elevator car, continuing down to the basement level. The shaft ended at closed doors. The manual release is on the right, Mitchell whispered. Harrington found the lever and pulled it, forcing the doors to part just enough for them to see into the basement corridor beyond. It was dark except for the same emergency lighting, but they could make out 2 armed figures standing guard outside the server room 20 meters away. We need a distraction, Harrington whispered. Mitchell reached into her pocket and produced a small device. Remote access module for the server systems. If I can connect to the emergency power circuit. She worked quickly, connecting the device to exposed wires in the elevator control panel. After a few seconds, the emergency lights in the corridor beyond flickered dramatically. The guards reacted immediately, one moving to investigate while the other remained at his post. One is manageable, Harrington murmured. He drew a combat knife from his boot, quieter than his sidearm. When the remaining guard turned to watch his companion investigate the lighting issue, Harrington pushed the doors open wider and slipped through, moving swiftly and silently across the concrete floor. Years of combat experience guided his movements, allowing him to close the distance without alerting his target. The guard sensed him too late. Harrington clamped one hand over the man's mouth while bringing the knife to bear in a precise, lethal strike. The guard struggled briefly, then went limp. Harrington lowered him silently to the floor. He motioned for Mitchell to join him, and together they moved toward the second guard, who was examining the electrical panel at the end of the corridor. Harrington approached from behind, but this time the floor betrayed him, a subtle creak giving away his position. The guard spun, raising his weapon. Mitchell reacted first, throwing her knife with surprising accuracy. It caught the guard in the shoulder, causing him to cry out and drop his rifle. Before he could recover, Harrington was on him, delivering a precise strike that rendered him unconscious. "Where did you learn to throw a knife like that?" Harrington asked, genuinely impressed. "3 years in Afghanistan with a Special Forces attachment," Mitchell replied, retrieving her knife. "You pick up skills." They secured the unconscious guard, then approached the server room door. It was locked with a keypad. "Can you get us in?" Harrington asked. Mitchell examined his keypad briefly. "This isn't standard issue. They've replaced it with their own security system." "Can you bypass it?" She shook her head. "Not quickly, but there might be another way." She moved to a ventilation grate in the wall beside the door. These ducts connect all the server rooms for cooling purposes. They're large enough to crawl through. "You seem to know a lot about this facility's vulnerabilities, Captain," Harrington observed, his suspicion returning. Mitchell met his gaze steadily. "It's my job to identify and address potential security weaknesses in our systems, sir. I submitted a full report on these vulnerabilities 6 months ago. Was anything done about it?" "Budget constraints," she replied, the frustration evident in her voice. "My report was acknowledged but marked for future consideration." Harrington felt a familiar irritation at bureaucratic short-sightedness. "Let's use those vulnerabilities to our advantage, then." Mitchell removed the grate, revealing a duct large enough for a person to navigate on hands and knees. "I'll go first, sir." She disappeared into the opening. Harrington followed, finding the space tight but manageable. They crawled silently for about 30 feet before Mitchell stopped at another grate. Through it, they could see the server room. Inside, 3 men worked at the main console. Harrington recognized one immediately: Captain David Foster, his facility's security officer. The betrayal stung, but it explained how the attackers had gained such detailed access. "One of ours," he whispered to Mitchell. She nodded grimly. "The other 2 aren't facility personnel. But that equipment they're installing on our servers, it's military-grade intrusion hardware. They're not just shutting us down, they're taking control of our systems." "For what purpose?" "With access to these servers, they could potentially control every automated system in the facility, including the defensive turrets and, if they have the right codes, possibly even the demonstration tanks." The implications were chilling. Blackwood wasn't just planning to attack the military leadership. He was planning to use the facility's own weapons to do it. "We need to stop them now," Harrington whispered. "On 3, I'll remove this grate. You take the 2 unknowns. I'll handle Foster." Mitchell nodded, drawing her sidearm. 1, 2, 3. Harrington wrenched the grate free and was through the opening in one fluid motion, landing on his feet with his weapon raised. "Hands where I can see them," he shouted. "Step away from the consoles." The 2 technicians froze, slowly raising their hands. Foster, however, spun around with remarkable speed, a pistol already in his hand. "Colonel," he said, his voice cold, "you should be in the shelter with the others." "Drop the weapon, Foster," Harrington ordered, his aim unwavering. "It's over." Foster smiled, a chilling expression devoid of warmth. "It's only just beginning, sir." Mitchell emerged from the duct behind Harrington, her weapon trained on the technicians. "Whatever Blackwood promised you, it's not worth it," Harrington said, trying to reach the man he thought he knew. "This is treason." "Treason?" Foster laughed bitterly. "What do you call it when your government sacrifices its soldiers for political expediency? When it buries the truth to protect those in power?" "I call it something we fight to change from within the system," Harrington replied, "not by becoming terrorists." "You always were an idealist, Colonel," came a new voice from the doorway behind Foster. "That was both your greatest strength and your most exploitable weakness." Harrington's blood ran cold. He knew that voice as well as his own. Slowly, Marcus Blackwood stepped into view, his familiar frame silhouetted in the doorway. He wore standard combat fatigues without insignia, a tactical vest laden with equipment, and carried an M4 carbine held casually at the ready. "Marcus," Harrington acknowledged, keeping his weapon trained on Foster, "I had hoped I was wrong about you." Blackwood stepped fully into the room, his weathered face impassive but his eyes burning with an intensity Harrington recognized from their days in combat together. "And I had hoped to spare you from this, William," Blackwood replied. "You weren't supposed to be here today." "This is my facility," Harrington said. "Where else would I be when the Secretary and Joint Chiefs visit?" "A visit I arranged," Blackwood revealed. "My contacts in Washington are still quite useful." The pieces clicked into place in Harrington's mind. The whole thing was a setup from the beginning. You manipulated the schedule to bring them here, to you. "Efficiency has always been my watchword," Blackwood said with a cold smile. "Why chase targets across the country when you can bring them all to one secure, controlled location?" Despite the situation, Harrington felt a grudging admiration for the tactical brilliance of the plan. It was pure Blackwood, elegant, thorough, and devastating in its simplicity. "What happened to you, Marcus?" Harrington asked, genuinely pained by what his friend had become. "We both lost people. We both saw the ugliness of politics interfering with military operations. But this?" Blackwood's expression hardened. "What happened? They murdered my son, William, sent him on an illegal operation into Iran, then abandoned him and his team when things went wrong. And when I demanded answers, they buried me in classified documents and non-disclosure agreements." "So this is revenge," Harrington said, trying to keep Blackwood talking while he assessed their options. Mitchell stood firm beside him, but they were outnumbered and in a vulnerable position. "This is justice," Blackwood corrected him. "The same people who ordered my son's death are coming here today. The same people who then covered it up. They will face judgment for their actions. And the collateral damage, the innocent personnel of this facility. There won't be any if they follow shelter protocols as trained," Blackwood assured him. "This isn't a massacre, William. It's a precision strike." "You know I can't let you do this," Harrington said, his voice heavy with the weight of decades of friendship now ending in this confrontation. "And you know I've always been the better tactician," Blackwood replied without arrogance, simply stating a fact they both acknowledged. "Your position here is untenable." As if to emphasize his point, the door behind Harrington opened and 4 more armed men entered, their weapons trained on him and Mitchell. "Captain Mitchell," Blackwood said, turning his attention to her, "your assistance has been invaluable." Harrington felt as if he'd been punched in the gut. He turned to Mitchell, disbelief evident in his expression. Her face remained impassive, but her eyes conveyed a complex mix of emotions: regret, determination, and something deeper that Harrington couldn't immediately identify. "You," he managed, the single word laden with betrayal. "My brother was on that team with Marcus's son," she said quietly. "The official report said they died in a training accident in Germany, but there were inconsistencies, things that didn't add up." The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Her transfer to Rockwell hadn't been a career move, but a carefully planned infiltration. "I trusted you," Harrington said, the words coming out harsher than he intended. "And I respected you," she replied, genuine emotion finally breaking through her composed exterior. "That's why I tried to ensure you wouldn't be here today. I arranged for your leave paperwork, but you declined it." "Enough," Blackwood interrupted. "William, you have a choice to make. Join us, help us bring those responsible to justice, or—" He left the alternative unspoken but clear. Harrington looked from Blackwood to Mitchell, then to the armed men surrounding them. His mind raced through scenarios, calculating odds and outcomes as he had done countless times in combat. There was no tactically sound option that ended with him stopping Blackwood here and now. "You know my answer, Marcus," he said finally, his voice steady. Blackwood's expression showed genuine regret. "I do, which is why I came prepared." He nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward with a zip tie to secure Harrington's hands. "Colonel Harrington will be secured in the Auxiliary Command Center," Blackwood ordered. "He is not to be harmed. Captain Mitchell, continue your work. We're on a tight schedule." As one of the men moved to take Harrington's weapon, the colonel made his decision. In a blindingly fast motion, he slammed the butt of his pistol into the man's face, then pivoted to fire at the ceiling lights, plunging the room into relative darkness. In the same movement, he grabbed Mitchell's arm and pulled her toward the ventilation duct they had used to enter. "Go," he shouted, firing 2 more shots to keep Blackwood's men at bay. Mitchell hesitated only for a split second before diving into the duct. Harrington fired his remaining rounds in a suppressing pattern, then followed her, pulling the grate partially back into place behind him. Bullets pinged off the metal around them as they crawled rapidly away from the server room. "Left at the junction," Mitchell whispered urgently. "It leads to the emergency generator room." Harrington followed her directions, his mind still processing her betrayal. Yet she had chosen to flee with him rather than remain with Blackwood. The implications of that choice would have to wait. They emerged from this ventilation system into the generator room, a massive space filled with industrial equipment that hummed with power. The emergency systems, at least, were still functioning. "Why help me escape?" Harrington demanded as soon as they were clear of the duct. Mitchell's expression was troubled. "Because Blackwood changed the plan. This was supposed to be a capture operation, bring the Joint Chiefs to justice through a military tribunal. But I saw the explosives his men were planting. He's going to execute them, along with everyone in the facility." "How large an explosive package?" Harrington asked, tactical considerations immediately taking precedence over his sense of betrayal. "Enough to destroy the entire main complex. They have remote detonators." Harrington processed this information quickly. "We need to warn Davis and get to those explosives." "The nearest exit is through that door, up the service stairs," Mitchell said, pointing across the generator room. "It will bring us out near the motor pool." Harrington studied her for a moment longer, making his decision. "I'm giving you one chance, Captain. Help me stop this completely, and I'll speak for you when this is over. Betray me again, and I'll personally ensure you spend the rest of your life in Leavenworth. Clear?" "Crystal, sir," Mitchell replied, her expression resolute. "For what it's worth, I never wanted it to come to this. I just wanted the truth about my brother." "Then let's go find it," Harrington said grimly, moving toward the exit, "and save a lot of lives in the process." They made their way cautiously up the service stairs and emerged into the bright Montana morning. The sounds of sporadic gunfire continued across the complex. In the distance, they could see smoke rising from several locations. "Motor pool's 200 meters that way," Mitchell said, pointing toward a large hangar-like structure. They moved quickly but carefully, using buildings for cover. As they approached the motor pool, a thunderous explosion shook the ground. They turned to see a fireball rising from the VIP landing zone on the south side of the complex. "Davis," Harrington muttered, hoping his officer had managed to delay the secretary's arrival. If the helicopter had already landed, they reached the motor pool to find it largely abandoned. Most of the vehicles were gone, presumably taken by personnel responding to the attack. But in the far corner, partially hidden under a tarp, Harrington spotted something that gave him a surge of hope. "Is that what I think it is?" Mitchell asked as they approached. Harrington pulled back the tarp to reveal an M1 Abrams tank, an older model than the M1A2s used in the demonstration. Its desert tan paint was faded, and portions of its armor showed the scars of combat. "The old Warhorse," Harrington confirmed, a grim smile forming on his weathered face. "My tank from Desert Storm. We keep her operational for historical demonstrations." He climbed up onto the hull with the agility of a man half his age, muscle memory guiding his movements. He opened the commander's hatch and dropped inside, the familiar confines of the tank's interior bringing back a flood of memories. "You know how to operate an Abrams?" he called to Mitchell. "I'm certified on this fire control systems," she replied, climbing up to join him. "But I've never actually driven one in combat conditions." "Today's your lucky day," then, Harrington said, moving to the gunner's position. "You're driving. I'll handle the main gun." As Mitchell lowered herself into the driver's compartment, Harrington began the startup sequence, his hands moving across the controls with practiced ease. The massive turbine engine roared to life, the sound reverberating through the motor pool. "Remember, this is an older model," he instructed. "The controls are similar to the M1A2, but less automated. Follow my commands exactly." Mitchell nodded, her hands finding the steering controls. "Take us out, Captain," Harrington ordered. "We have a coup to stop." The tank lurched forward, Mitchell quickly adjusting to the controls. They burst out of the motor pool into the sunlight, the 68-ton war machine picking up speed as it rolled across the complex. Ahead, they could see a group of Blackwood's men establishing a defensive position around the administration building. They spotted the tank approaching and opened fire, but their small arms were ineffective against the Abrams' heavy armor. Harrington swiveled the main gun toward them. "Traversing right," he called out of habit, though he was handling both commander and gunner roles. "Target infantry in the open, heat round." He loaded the high-explosive anti-tank shell into the breech, then acquired the target through the gunner's sight. "On the way," he called, pressing the fire control. The 120mm main gun roared, the tank rocking slightly with the recoil. The shell impacted near the defensive position. Not a direct hit, but close enough to scatter the enemy forces in panic. "Good effect on target," Harrington observed. "Forward, increase speed." Mitchell guided the tank toward the administration building. crushing a small security vehicle that stood in their path. "Sir, look," she called, pointing to their right. A column of 3 Humvees was speeding across the complex, heading toward the tank. Through the commander's sight, Harrington could make out Jackson's distinctive form in the lead vehicle. "Friendly forces approaching from right," he informed Mitchell. "Bring us alongside them." She adjusted course, and the tank rolled up beside the lead Humvee. Jackson gave a quick salute through the window, then gestured for them to follow. Harrington opened the commander's hatch and raised his head out for direct communication. "Report, Sergeant Major," he shouted over the roar of engines. "Davis's team engaged hostiles at the landing zone," Jackson called back. VIP helicopter was warned off, but a secondary explosion caught their tail rotor. They crashed just outside the perimeter. Davis is extracting survivors now. "Blackwood's real objective is inside the main complex," Harrington informed him. "They've planted explosives. We need to find and neutralize them." Jackson nodded his understanding. "My team swept the east wing, clear so far, but hostiles have fortified positions around the central command hub. That's where we're heading." Harrington decided. "Your men follow and support. The tank will draw their fire and breach their defenses." Jackson acknowledged the order, then spoke into his radio, directing his forces. Harrington dropped back into the tank, closing the hatch. "Change of plans. We're assaulting the central command hub. Maximum speed." Mitchell pushed the throttle forward, and the massive vehicle surged ahead, quickly outpacing the Humvees. They rounded a corner to find a barricade of vehicles blocking the road to the command center. Behind it, at least a dozen of Blackwood's men had established a firing position with a heavy machine gun. They opened fire as soon as the tank appeared, the rounds pinging harmlessly off the armored hull. "Straight through," Harrington ordered. "Don't slow down." Mitchell kept the throttle open, and the Abrams crashed into the barricade, tossing cars aside like toys. The enemy fighters scattered, but the machine gun continued firing, now aiming at the less protected rear of the tank. Harrington swiveled the main gun 180 degrees and fired another heat round. The explosion obliterated the machine gun position. As they approached the command center, Harrington could see more of Blackwood's forces taking defensive positions. Some carried shoulder-mounted anti-tank weapons, a genuine threat to the Abrams if they could hit vulnerable points. "Evasive maneuvers," he commanded. "Random pattern, don't give them a stable target." Mitchell zigzagged the tank, making it difficult for the enemy to acquire a lock. Harrington fired the coaxial machine gun, keeping the anti-tank teams pinned down. Through the commander's optics, he suddenly spotted a familiar figure emerging from the command center. Marcus Blackwood himself, surrounded by a protective detail. He was carrying a hard case that Harrington recognized as a remote detonator. "Target identified," Harrington announced. "Blackwood at command center entrance, preparing to evacuate." Mitchell adjusted course, bringing them directly toward the command center's main doors. Blackwood's men fired desperately at the approaching tank, but it was like trying to stop a force of nature. "He's getting into a vehicle," Harrington observed. "We can't let him leave with that detonator." As Blackwood's SUV started to pull away, Harrington made a split-second decision. He traversed the main gun and fired a carefully placed shot that impacted the road directly in front of the vehicle. The explosion tore a crater in the pavement, forcing the SUV to swerve and crash into a concrete barrier. "Direct hit," Harrington confirmed. "Target vehicle disabled." He watched as Blackwood and several men emerged from the damaged SUV, the hard case still in Blackwood's hand. They retreated back toward the command center, firing at the tank as they went. "Get us closer," Harrington ordered. "I need a clear shot at that case." Mitchell drove the tank up the steps of the command center, crushing the ornamental railings. The Abrams ground to a halt directly before the main entrance, its main gun pointed at the glass doors. Harrington loaded another round, then hesitated. Firing into the building could kill everyone inside, including potential hostages. "Sir," Mitchell's voice came from the driver's compartment. "There's another way." Before he could respond, she had opened her hatch and was climbing out of the tank. "Mitchell!" he shouted, but she was already moving, drawing her sidearm as she ran toward a side entrance. "Damn it," Harrington muttered. He couldn't leave the tank unmanned, but he couldn't let her face Blackwood alone, whether she was still loyal to him or not. He quickly secured the weapon systems and followed her, drawing his own pistol as he exited the tank. Inside, the command center was eerily quiet. Emergency lighting cast long shadows through the corridors. Harrington moved silently, following Mitchell's path through the building. Years of combat experience guided his movements, allowing him to advance without making a sound. He found signs of a firefight, shell casings on the floor, bullet holes in the walls, but no bodies. Either the facility staff had been evacuated or a scream echoed from the direction of the main control room. Harrington recognized Mitchell's voice. He abandoned stealth for speed, running toward the sound. He burst into the control room to find Mitchell on her knees, a gun to her head. Behind her stood Captain Foster. Across the room, Blackwood was connecting the hard case to the facility's main computer system. "Hold it right there, Colonel," Foster called, pressing the gun harder against Mitchell's temple. "One more step and she dies." Harrington assessed the situation instantly. Foster was nervous, his hands slightly shaking. Blackwood was focused on his task, typing commands into the computer. "It's over, Marcus," Harrington called, keeping his weapon trained on Blackwood. "The Secretary's helicopter was diverted. The Joint Chiefs aren't here. You've failed." Blackwood didn't look up from his work. On the contrary, William, the primary targets were never the objective. Confusion flashed across Harrington's face. "What?" "This facility controls the automated defense systems for 3 states, Blackwood explained, continuing to type. "With the right access codes, which Captain Mitchell so helpfully provided, I can activate the prototype autonomous weapons platforms being tested in Nevada." The implications hit Harrington like a physical blow. The Nevada testing grounds house the next generation of unmanned combat vehicles. Tanks, aircraft, and artillery, all connected through a secure network. "You're insane," Harrington breathed. "Those systems aren't fully tested. The targeting protocols aren't finalized. You could kill thousands of civilians." "They'll be programmed for precision strikes," Blackwood assured him, finally looking up. "Key government and military installations only. A surgical decapitation strike against a corrupt leadership. And you think the military will just stand down afterward? That there won't be devastating retaliation against whoever they can find to blame? By the time they sort it out, we'll have released all the evidence. The classified files proving how our government sacrificed its own soldiers, covered up civilian casualties, lied to the American people for decades." Blackwood's eyes burned with zealous conviction. "The system will collapse under the weight of its own corruption." "And how many will die in the chaos that follows?" Harrington demanded. "How many innocents caught in the crossfire of your revolution?" Blackwood's expression hardened. "Fewer than have died in the pointless wars our leaders have dragged us into for the past 30 years. As they spoke, Harrington noted Mitchell's position, the placement of Foster behind her, and the distance to Blackwood. His mind calculated angles, timing, probabilities. "I never took you for a coward, Marcus," Harrington said, deliberately provocative. "Hiding behind computers and remote weapons instead of facing your enemies directly." The barb struck home. Blackwood's eyes flashed with anger. "I faced my enemies directly for 27 years, William. All it got me was a dead son and a medical discharge." "And what would your son think of this?" Harrington pressed, taking a subtle step to the left, adjusting his firing angle. "Of his father becoming the very thing we both fought against, a terrorist who targets civilians?" "Don't you dare speak of my son," Blackwood snarled, his composure cracking. "You have no idea what—" The momentary distraction was all Mitchell needed. She suddenly drove her elbow backward with tremendous force, catching Foster in the groin. As he doubled over in pain, she grabbed his gun hand and twisted, forcing the weapon away from her head. Simultaneously, Harrington fired twice at Blackwood, but the former colonel had the reflexes of a lifetime soldier. He dove for cover behind a console, the bullets missing him by inches. Foster and Mitchell struggled for control of the pistol. In the confined space, Harrington couldn't risk another shot without potentially hitting Mitchell. Blackwood emerged from cover, firing his own weapon at Harrington, forcing him to take shelter behind a support column. The exchange of gunfire was brief but intense, bullets shattering equipment and ricocheting off metal surfaces. During the chaos, Mitchell managed to disarm Foster, delivering a vicious strike to his throat that left him gasping on the floor. She scrambled toward Harrington's position, the captured pistol in her hand. "The detonator case," she gasped as she reached him. "We have to stop it. He's already initiated the activation sequence." Harrington peered around the column. Blackwood had retreated to the far side of the room, taking cover behind the main server bank. The hard case sat on the central console, its digital display counting down. "Cover me," Harrington ordered. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he sprinted toward the console. Mitchell provided covering fire, forcing Blackwood to keep his head down. Harrington reached the case and ignited it quickly. The countdown showed less than 2 minutes remaining. The case was connected to the facility's main computer by a heavy data cable. "Can you disable it?" Mitchell called, still exchanging fire with Blackwood. Not in time, Harrington replied, studying the interface. The system required a command authorization code to abort, a code only Blackwood would have. He made a swift decision, disconnecting the data cable from the facility computer. The countdown continued. The case had its own power source, but at least it was no longer connected to the network. It's still armed, he called to Mitchell. We need to get it out of the building. A bullet whizzed past his ear, embedding itself in the console. Blackwood had worked his way to a better firing position. You always were too stubborn to know when you're beaten, William, Blackwood called. That case has a tamper-proof seal. Try to move it, and it detonates immediately. Harrington looked at the case more carefully and saw the motion sensor Blackwood had mentioned. It was sophisticated, military-grade technology designed to prevent exactly what he was attempting. 1 minute, 30 seconds, Mitchell reported, glancing at the countdown. We need a solution now, sir. Harrington's mind raced through options. They couldn't disarm it, couldn't move it, and couldn't let it complete its activation sequence. There was only one choice left. Get out of the building, he ordered Mitchell. Now. Sir? That's an order, Captain. Get clear. Alert Jackson's team to establish a perimeter. No one enters until this is resolved. Understanding dawned in her eyes. There has to be another way. There isn't. Go. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. It's been an honor, sir, despite everything. Likewise, Captain. As Mitchell retreated toward the exit, Harrington turned his attention back to Blackwood, who remained in cover across the room. It's just you and me now, Marcus, he called. Like old times. There's still time to join me, William, Blackwood replied, his voice echoing in the large space. We could rebuild this country together, make it what it should be. I took an oath to the Constitution, not to some warped vision of vigilante justice, Harrington said firmly. 1 minute remaining, Blackwood observed, glancing at the case's display. Your choice, old friend. Harrington had already made his choice. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small device, a signal jammer he'd taken from the security office. It wouldn't stop the countdown, but it might prevent the activation signal from reaching its destination. He activated the jammer and placed it directly beside the case. What are you doing? Blackwood demanded, noticing the device. Insurance policy, Harrington replied. Even if this thing completes its sequence, the signal won't reach Nevada. Blackwood emerged from cover, his weapon raised. You have no idea what you're interfering with. This isn't just about my son anymore. It's about the soul of our nation. If you believe that, you wouldn't be hiding in the shadows, Harrington countered. You'd make your case in the light of day, present your evidence to the American people directly. I tried that, Blackwood spat. Congressional hearings, official channels, the media, they buried it all. So your answer is mass murder? Harrington took a step toward him. That's not the Marcus Blackwood I knew. For a moment, doubt flickered across Blackwood's face. Then his expression hardened again. The Marcus you knew died with his son. 30 seconds. Harrington made his final play. I know what really happened to your son, Marcus. Blackwood froze. What? I've been investigating it privately for years. I found things, documents, witnesses, things they tried to bury. You're lying, Blackwood said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Why would I lie now, with death staring us both in the face? Harrington took another step forward. Your son wasn't on an illegal mission. He was tracking a rogue CIA operative selling nuclear material to Iran. His team got too close, and elements within our own intelligence community betrayed them. Blackwood's hand trembled slightly. How do you know this? Because my son is following the same trail, Harrington revealed. Robert is with Delta Force now, hunting the people responsible. If you do this, if you activate those weapons, you'll destroy any chance of bringing the real criminals to justice. 10 seconds, came the automated voice from the case. Blackwood's resolve visibly wavered. I can't stop it now. The sequence is locked. Then help me contain it, Harrington urged, closing the distance between them. Together, one last mission. 5 seconds remained on the display. Their eyes met across the room. Two old soldiers, once brothers in arms, now on opposite sides of a devastating conflict. In that moment of connection, something of the old Blackwood resurfaced. He lowered his weapon and moved swiftly to the case. The jammer might not be strong enough, he said, examining the device. We need to shield it physically. The vault, Harrington suggested, pointing to the security room's steel-reinforced door across the hall. If we can get it inside— No time, Blackwood interrupted as the countdown reached 0. Instead, in a move that caught Harrington completely by surprise, Blackwood grabbed the case and ran toward the far wall, where a large window overlooked the parade ground 3 stories below. "Marcus!" Harrington shouted, realizing his former friend's intention. But it was too late. Blackwood crashed through the window in a shower of glass, the case clutched tightly to his chest as he fell. The explosion shook the building, sending Harrington staggering backward. He rushed to the shattered window and looked down. Where Blackwood had fallen, a smoking crater marred the parade ground. Of the man himself, there was nothing left to see. For a moment, Harrington stood motionless, overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just happened. His oldest friend, his brother in arms, gone in an instant by his own choice. The sound of running footsteps broke his reverie. Mitchell and Jackson burst into the room, weapons ready. "Colonel," Jackson called, "are you all right?" Harrington turned slowly from the window. "Blackwood is dead. The immediate threat is neutralized." "We've secured most of the facility," Mitchell reported. "Davis reports the secretary and 2 joint chiefs are safe. They sustained minor injuries in the helicopter crash but are stable." "And Blackwood's men?" "Some are still fighting, but they're scattered and disorganized," Jackson answered. "Without Blackwood's leadership, they're falling apart." Harrington nodded, processing the information. "Sweep the entire facility for additional explosives. And I want a full inventory of everything in the server room. We need to know exactly what they accessed and what might have been compromised." "Yes, sir," Jackson acknowledged, turning to relay the orders. Mitchell remained, her expression troubled. "Colonel, about my involvement." Harrington fixed her with a penetrating stare. "We'll address that once this situation is fully contained, Captain. For now, you're still under my command." "Understood, sir." She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, when I saw what Blackwood truly intended, I couldn't be part of it. My brother would never have wanted this." "Actions have consequences, Captain," Harrington replied, his tone firm, but not vindictive. "But so does choosing the right path, even if it comes late." As Mitchell left to carry out his orders, Harrington turned back to the window. Below, emergency vehicles were converging on the crater where Marcus Blackwood had ended his revolution and his life. In the distance, the Montana mountains stood, as they always had, unmoved by the human drama that had played out in their shadow. The sun continued its arc across the sky, oblivious to the lives changed and ended in the valley below. William Harrington, the old warrior, felt the weight of the day settle onto his shoulders. He had lost a friend, confronted betrayal, and prevented a catastrophe. But the questions Blackwood had raised about government accountability, about the treatment of soldiers, about the truth behind classified operations, those remained unanswered. As he turned to join the efforts to secure the facility, Harrington made a silent promise to himself and to the memory of the man Marcus Blackwood had once been. He would find those answers, whatever it took. The battle for Rockwell was over, but the war for truth had only just begun. 3 hours had passed since Blackwood's death. The Montana sky had darkened with storm clouds rolling in from the west, mirroring the grim atmosphere that had settled over the Rockwell Advanced Tactical Center. Colonel William Harrington stood in the makeshift command post they had established in the motor pool after securing the main complex. His weathered face revealed nothing of the turmoil within him as he studied the tactical display showing the current situation. "Final sweep of the east sector complete, sir," Sergeant Major Jackson reported, approaching with a tablet displaying the latest updates. "All hostiles either neutralized or captured. We've secured 23 prisoners in total." Harrington nodded, his mind already moving to the next priorities. "And the explosive devices?" "EOD team has located and disarmed 5 additional packages," Jackson replied. "They were positioned at key structural points throughout the facility. If they had detonated simultaneously," he didn't need to finish the sentence. Harrington understood the implications perfectly. Blackwood's plan had been more devastating than initially thought. Not just an assassination of military leadership, but the complete destruction of the facility and everyone in it. "Casualties?" Harrington asked, his voice steady despite the weight of command. 7 of ours killed in action, 12 wounded, 3 critically. Medevac choppers arrived 30 minutes ago, taking the worst cases to Great Falls." Each number struck Harrington like a physical blow, though his expression remained stoic. 7 families would receive that dreaded visit. 7 flags would be folded with precise, solemn movements. 7 lives cut short because of a vendetta that had spiraled into madness. "And the secretary?" he asked. "Stable," Jackson answered. "Minor concussion and a broken wrist from the helicopter crash. The two joint chiefs with him sustained similar injuries. Major Davis is with them now, coordinating their evacuation once the weather clears. Thunder rumbled in the distance, as if nature itself was commenting on the day's events. Harrington turned his attention to the rain-spattered window. The facility that had been his pride for the past 5 years now resembled a war zone. Smoke still rose from several damaged buildings. Military police and regular troops moved purposefully across the grounds, securing areas and attending to the aftermath. "Sir," Jackson said, hesitating slightly, "about Captain Mitchell." Harrington's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Where is she now?" "Under guard in Maintenance Bay 4, as you ordered, sir." "And her statement?" "Recorded and transmitted to General Westmoreland's office. She's been cooperative, provided names, contacts, details of Blackwood's network." Harrington absorbed this information silently. Mitchell's betrayal cut deeper than he cared to admit. He had seen potential in her, had mentored her, trusted her with sensitive aspects of the facility's operations. Yet in the end, she had chosen a different path, until the final moments when she'd helped him stop Blackwood. The complexity of her actions defied simple judgment. "Sir, the old Warhorse performed admirably today," Jackson added, changing the subject with the intuition of a long-serving NCO who knew his commander well. "Engineering team wants to know if you'd like them to begin repairs." The mention of the tank, his tank from Desert Storm, brought the first hint of warmth to Harrington's expression. "Yes, full restoration. I want her combat ready." "Understood, Colonel." As Jackson turned to relay the order, Major Thomas Davis entered the command post. Despite the bandage on his forehead and the obvious fatigue in his movements, he carried himself with the disciplined posture of a career officer. "Thomas," Harrington acknowledged him, "how are our guests?" "Shaken but stabilizing, sir. The secretary wants to speak with you as soon as possible. He's asking questions about Blackwood, about what happened here." Harrington had expected this. The official narrative would need to be constructed carefully. A domestic terrorist attack by a rogue former officer didn't fit neatly into press releases or congressional briefings. "Did you tell him anything?" "Only the basics, sir, that we're still piecing together the full picture." Harrington nodded approvingly. "Good. For now, that's all anyone needs to know. The complete truth is more complicated than anyone is ready to hear." He moved to the tactical board, studying the facility layout with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades planning and executing military operations. "Has anyone accessed the server room data? Found out what Blackwood was really after?" "Cyber team is working on it now," Davis reported. "But the encryption is sophisticated, military grade, but not standard issue. They're saying it could take hours, maybe days to crack." "We don't have days," Harrington said firmly. "If Blackwood had outside support, they'll be covering their tracks already. Get Mitchell in here. She might have the access codes we need." Davis hesitated. "Sir, regulations regarding compromised personnel." "I know the regulations, Major," Harrington cut him off, his tone brooking no argument. "I also know we need those servers decrypted now. Mitchell helped create the chaos. She can help us clean it up." "Yes, sir," Davis replied, turning to carry out the order. Left alone momentarily, Harrington allowed himself to feel the full weight of the day's events. His knee throbbed where the old mine injury had been aggravated during the fighting. His shoulders ached from the recoil of the tank's main gun. But the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the mental burden. Marcus Blackwood had been more than a fellow officer. They had saved each other's lives multiple times during Desert Storm. They had shared the unique bond that forms only in combat, when men entrust their lives to one another. That the same man had become so twisted by grief and rage that he would orchestrate this attack. It spoke to a darkness that Harrington knew existed in warfare, but had hoped never to confront on American soil. The door opened again and 2 MPs escorted Captain Sarah Mitchell into the command post. Her uniform was disheveled, her wrists bound with plastic restraints, but she held her head high. Her eyes met Harrington's without flinching. "Leave us," Harrington ordered the MPs. "Wait outside." Once they were alone, Harrington studied Mitchell in silence for a long moment. She stood at attention despite her restraints, a soldier to the core despite her actions. "Why?" he finally asked, the single word carrying the weight of all his questions. Mitchell took a deep breath. "My brother was Staff Sergeant James Mitchell, sir. He served under Lieutenant Blackwood, Jr. in the 5th Special Forces Group. The official report said they died in a training accident in Germany, but there was no body returned to my family. Just a sealed casket and condolences." And Blackwood convinced you it was a cover-up, Harrington stated rather than asked. He had evidence, sir, satellite imagery showing their team in Iran, not Germany, communication transcripts, mission parameters that were never officially acknowledged. Harrington moved to the window, looking out at the storm that had fully engulfed the facility now. Rain lashed against the glass, driven by winds that bent the tops of the distant pine trees. You could have come to me, he said quietly. You should have trusted me enough for that. Would you have believed me, sir? Mitchell countered. A captain making accusations about classified operations, implicating senior leadership in a cover-up? I tried the official channels first, filed inquiries, requested information under the Freedom of Information Act. All I got were redacted documents and stone walls. Harrington turned back to face her. So instead you joined a terrorist plot, helped a man who was planning mass murder. That wasn't the original plan, Mitchell insisted, her voice hardening. Blackwood told us we would capture the Secretary and Joint Chiefs, force them to acknowledge what happened in Iran, expose the truth, the explosives, the autonomous weapons platform. That came later after I was already too deeply involved. And when did you realize Blackwood had gone beyond seeking justice to seeking vengeance? Mitchell's composure cracked slightly. When I saw him planting the explosives yesterday, that's when I knew he wasn't planning a capture operation anymore. That's when I tried to warn you, to get you to take leave. Harrington remembered the leave request that had appeared in his inbox the previous week, supposedly ordered by the Pentagon to give him a break before the VIP visit. He had declined it, unwilling to be away from his command during such an important event. I need your help now, Captain, Harrington said, his tone shifting from interrogation to command. The encryption on the servers Blackwood accessed. Can you break it? Mitchell nodded. Yes, sir, I helped install it. It's a modified version of a military protocol, but with a personalized key sequence. Harrington stepped forward and cut the restraints from her wrists with his pocket knife. Then you're temporarily reinstated to duty, under my personal supervision and responsibility. She rubbed her wrists, surprise evident in her expression. Sir, I don't understand. You made a choice today, Mitchell. When it counted most, you chose to stop Blackwood rather than help him. That doesn't erase your actions, but it gives me reason enough to trust you for what comes next. And what does come next, sir? Harrington's expression darkened. We find out what Blackwood knew that made him willing to commit treason. We find out what really happened to your brother and his team, and then we decide what to do with that information. The door opened and Davis returned with Jackson beside him. Both men looked at Mitchell's unbound wrists with poorly concealed concern. The captain is assisting us with the server decryption, Harrington explained, his tone making it clear the decision was not up for debate. Jackson, have a secure workstation set up in here immediately. Davis, I need you to coordinate with General Westmoreland's office. Tell them we have a potential security breach involving classified operations in Iran from 3 years ago. Both men acknowledged the orders and moved to carry them out, though Davis's expression revealed his reservations about including Mitchell in sensitive operations. One more thing, Harrington added. I want the old Warhorse moved to the secure hangar on the west side. Full systems check and resupply of ammunition. Sir, Jackson questioned, sensing there was more to the request than simple restoration of the tank. Call it a precaution, Sergeant Major, Harrington replied. If Blackwood had allies beyond those we've captured, we may need to move quickly and with substantial firepower. As Jackson left to arrange the tank's relocation, Harrington turned back to Mitchell. How long to break the encryption? With the right equipment, 30 minutes, maybe less. You have 20, Harrington stated, because I suspect whatever Blackwood found is significant enough that people will already be working to make it disappear. The storm outside intensified, rain hammering against the windows like machine gun fire. Inside, the command post hummed with renewed activity as equipment was brought in and set up according to Harrington's orders. While waiting, Harrington reviewed the preliminary reports from the facility's security teams. The attack had been meticulously planned. Blackwood's forces had used detailed knowledge of Rockwell's layout and protocols, knowledge that could only have come from someone intimately familiar with the facility's operations. Captain Foster, the security officer who had been working with Blackwood, had been found dead in the server room, apparently taking his own life rather than facing capture. Colonel, Davis's voice interrupted his reading, General Westmoreland on Secure Line 1. Harrington moved to the secure communications terminal that had been established. This is Harrington. Bill? Westmoreland's voice came through clearly despite the encryption. What's the situation there? Facility secured. Blackwood is dead. 7 of our people killed, a dozen wounded. VIPs are stable and awaiting evacuation once the weather clears. And the infiltration of your systems? We're working on determining the extent now, Harrington replied carefully, conscious of how much to reveal. Preliminary assessments suggest Blackwood was after specific classified files. There was a pause on the line. What files exactly? We're still decrypting, but it appears to involve an operation in Iran from 3 years ago, possibly involving Blackwood's son. The silence that followed was telling. When Westmoreland spoke again, his voice had taken on a more formal, guarded tone. I'm dispatching a specialized cyber team to take over that aspect of the investigation, Bill. They'll be there as soon as the weather permits flight operations. Harrington's internal alarm bells rang loudly. With respect, General, my team is already making progress. Switching personnel now would only delay. This isn't a request, Colonel, Westmoreland interrupted. This comes directly from the Secretary. The data Blackwood accessed potentially compromises ongoing operations. Only personnel with specific clearance can handle it. I understand, sir, Harrington replied, his mind racing. Whatever was in those files, Westmoreland was clearly concerned about who saw it. Good. I'll be there personally tomorrow to debrief you and take custody of the prisoners. Until then, lock down those servers and suspend all decryption efforts. That's a direct order. Yes, sir, Harrington acknowledged, his voice neutral, despite the conflict raging within him. The call ended, and Harrington stood motionless for a moment, weighing his options. Directly disobeying a general's orders would end his career instantly. But something about Westmoreland's reaction felt wrong. Too quick, too concerned with controlling the information rather than understanding the threat. He turned to find Davis watching him, having clearly overheard enough to understand the situation. Sir, Davis questioned quietly. How long until that workstation is ready for Mitchell? Harrington asked, instead of addressing the implied question in Davis's tone. 5 minutes, sir. Make it 2, and then I want this room cleared of all personnel except you, Mitchell, Jackson, and myself. Davis nodded, understanding the implications. And General Westmoreland's orders? Harrington fixed him with a steady gaze. Sometimes, Major, we have to decide whether we're serving the person giving the order or the oath we took to the Constitution. I intend to find out which applies here. Davis straightened, almost imperceptibly, his decision made. Yes, sir, I'll clear the room. Within minutes, the command post had been transformed into an impromptu cyber operations center. Mitchell sat at the secure workstation, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she worked through the encryption layers Blackwood had placed on the servers. Talk to me, Captain, Harrington prompted, standing behind her with Davis and Jackson flanking him. Blackwood used a sophisticated layered approach, she explained without taking her eyes off the screen. Military-grade encryption wrapped in a personalized cipher. But he built in a backdoor, a way for trusted personnel to access the data even if he wasn't present. And you were trusted personnel, Harrington observed. Yes, sir, each of us had a unique access signature. Her hands paused briefly. I'm in, accessing the main directory now. The screen's filled with file directories, most with cryptic alphanumeric designations rather than descriptive names. There, Mitchell pointed to one folder labeled simply Scorpion. That's the operation designation Blackwood showed me. The mission his son and my brother were part of. Open it, Harrington ordered. The folder expanded to reveal dozens of documents, operational plans, personnel files, surveillance imagery, and after-action reports. Mitchell opened one of the larger files and the screen filled with a detailed operational brief. Operation Scorpion, Harrington read aloud. Covert insertion of Special Forces team into northwestern Iran to locate and neutralize a suspected nuclear materials smuggling network. Authorized by, he paused, his expression darkening, authorized by General James Westmoreland. The implications hung heavy in the air. Westmoreland had personally authorized the mission that had reportedly killed Blackwood's son and Mitchell's brother, then participated in covering it up as a training accident in Germany. Keep going, Harrington directed, his voice tightly controlled. Mitchell opened the after-action report, dated 3 years earlier. The document was clinical in its assessment of the operation's failure. The 8-man team had been compromised shortly after insertion, likely due to intelligence leaks. They had been surrounded by Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces near the town of Koy, close to the Turkish border. The report confirmed all 8 team members had been killed in the ensuing firefight. That contradicts the official story completely, Davis observed. Why cover up a failed mission against nuclear smugglers? We've acknowledged similar operations in the past. Because of this, Mitchell said grimly, opening another file labeled Asset Involvement. The document detailed the operational support provided by a CIA asset codenamed Monarch, who had reportedly provided the intelligence about the nuclear smuggling operation. Monarch, Harrington repeated, the designation triggering something in his memory. That was the code name for Andrew Kelso. The Secretary of Defense? Jackson asked, clearly shocked. Before his appointment, Kelso was the CIA's Deputy Director for Operations, Harrington explained. He personally ran the agency's highest value assets in the Middle East. If he was Monarch's handler, then he was responsible for the intelligence that sent those men into an ambush. Mitchell finished, her voice tight with controlled anger. Harrington continued reading, his expression becoming grimmer with each paragraph. According to this assessment, the intelligence was potentially compromised from the beginning. There were inconsistencies that should have led to the mission being scrubbed, but someone, redacted name, pushed for it to proceed despite the red flags. Kelso, Davis suggested. It would explain why he's here today, why Blackwood targeted this specific visit, and why Westmoreland is so desperate to control this information, Harrington added. He and Kelso have been allies for decades. If Kelso deliberately sent American soldiers into a trap, the implications were staggering. A serving Secretary of Defense potentially responsible for the deaths of 8 Special Forces operators, followed by a cover-up that reached the highest levels of military leadership. Sir, Jackson spoke up, his practical nature asserting itself. What do we do with this information? If we report it up the chain of command, it goes straight to the people implicated, Harrington finished for him. And if we go public, national security implications, Davis said. Confirmation of covert operations in Iran would create an international incident, possibly destabilize current diplomatic efforts. Harrington rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of command more heavily than ever before. Mitchell, download everything, every file, every document, then wipe all traces of our access from the system. Yes, sir, she acknowledged, immediately setting to work. What are you thinking, Colonel? Davis asked quietly. Harrington's eyes were cold with determination. I'm thinking that before this day is over, the Secretary of Defense is going to provide some answers, one way or another. As Mitchell worked to secure the files, a distant explosion shook the building. Jackson moved immediately to the window, his experienced eye quickly assessing the situation. North perimeter, sir, he reported tensely. That's nowhere near where our teams are operating. A second explosion followed, closer this time. The tactical display suddenly lit up with warning indicators along the facility's northern boundary. We've got multiple vehicles breaching the perimeter fence, Davis reported, studying the security feeds. Military-style, heavy weapons? Not ours. Harrington's mind shifted instantly to tactical assessment. Blackwood's reinforcements? Timing's wrong, Davis countered. They're too coordinated, too well-equipped. This is a professional force. The facility's alarm system activated, its wailing siren cutting through the sound of the storm outside. On the security feeds, they could see personnel running for defensive positions as the unknown force pushed deeper into the compound. Sir, Mitchell called, urgency in her voice. The server connection just dropped. Someone cut the hard line. Harrington made his decision instantly. Jackson, get to the motor pool. Mobilize whatever combat vehicles we have operational. Davis, alert all personnel. We are under attack by unknown hostile forces. Authorization for deadly force granted. Both men moved immediately to carry out his orders. Harrington turned back to Mitchell. Did you get everything? She held up a small external drive. Most of it, sir. The core files on Operation Scorpion and the subsequent cover-up. That will have to do. Now The command post door burst open. 2 men in tactical gear, faces covered by balaclavas and wearing no identifying insignia, entered with weapons raised. Colonel Harrington, one of them said, his voice distorted by a modulator. Come with us immediately. Presidential Security Directive. Harrington didn't move, his hands subtly shifting toward his sidearm. Identify yourselves properly. Unit and commanding officer. There's no time for protocols, the second intruder insisted. The facility is under attack. We're here to extract high-value personnel to safety. Under whose authority? Harrington demanded, buying time as he assessed their positions and possible actions. The highest, the first man replied impatiently. Now move, or we'll move you. Mitchell had slowly shifted her position, placing herself partially behind one of the workstations, out of the direct line of fire but with clear sight of both intruders. Harrington caught her eye briefly, a silent communication passing between them. Despite everything, their military training created an instinctive understanding of tactical situations. My sidearm, Harrington said, slowly reaching for his holstered pistol. I'll need to. Hands away from the weapon, the second intruder barked, stepping forward aggressively. In that moment of distraction, Mitchell made her move. She grabbed the heavy monitor from the workstation and hurled it at the nearest intruder, sending him staggering backward. Simultaneously, Harrington drew his sidearm with the practiced speed of a veteran soldier, firing 2 precise shots into the second intruder before the man could bring his weapon to bear. The first intruder recovered quickly, raising his weapon toward Mitchell. But Harrington was already pivoting, his third shot catching the man in the shoulder. He dropped his rifle, crying out in pain. Mitchell closed the distance swiftly, delivering a vicious kick that sent the wounded man crashing to the floor, unconscious. Grab his weapon, Harrington ordered, moving to secure the man he had shot. The intruder was still alive, but seriously wounded, blood seeping from beneath his tactical vest. Mitchell retrieved the fallen rifle, a suppressed M4 carbine with advanced optics, and checked the unconscious man for additional weapons or identification. Nothing, sir, she reported. No dog tags, no unit patches, no identification of any kind. Harrington knelt beside the wounded intruder, removing the man's balaclava to reveal a face he didn't recognize. The man was in his 30s with the hardened look of a professional soldier. His eyes glared defiantly up at Harrington despite the pain. "Who sent you?" Harrington demanded. The man's only response was a grimace of pain and hatred. "We need to move," Mitchell urged. "If these two were sent to capture you, there will be others." Harrington nodded grimly, rising to his feet. "The old Warhorse. If Jackson has followed my orders, it should be fueled and ready in the secure hangar." They moved quickly to the door, checking the corridor outside before proceeding. The facility was in chaos, with the sounds of gunfire echoing from multiple directions. The storm outside added to the confusion, rain and wind howling through damaged sections of the buildings. "Sir," Mitchell said, as they moved cautiously toward a side exit, "these aren't terrorists or militia. Their equipment, their tactics, their special operations, maybe contractors." "I know," Harrington replied grimly, "which means someone with significant authority sent them. Someone who knows what we found in those servers." They reached an exterior door that led to a service road, connecting the administrative buildings to the various hangars and motor pools. The rain was coming down in sheets, visibility reduced to less than 50 yards. "Stay close," Harrington instructed, leading the way into the downpour. They moved swiftly but cautiously along the road, using the storm as cover. Twice they had to take cover as unidentified vehicles passed, carrying more of the mysterious tactical teams deeper into the facility. "They're searching for something," Mitchell observed during one such pause, "or someone." "Us," Harrington confirmed grimly, "or more specifically, the information we downloaded." The secure hangar loomed ahead, its massive doors closed against the storm. A single guard post stood beside a smaller personnel entrance, but no one was visible. "This isn't right," Harrington murmured, studying the seemingly abandoned position. "Jackson would have posted security here." As if in answer to his concern, the personnel door swung open, and Sergeant Major Jackson emerged, waving them forward urgently. "Inside, quickly," he called over the howling wind. They sprinted the remaining distance, relief washing over Harrington at the sight of his trusted NCO. As they reached the door, Jackson ushered them in, then secured it behind them, engaging multiple locks. "Situation report," Harrington demanded, wiping rain from his face. "Clusterfuck, sir, if you'll pardon my language," Jackson replied grimly. "At least 30 hostile operators breached the north perimeter 15 minutes ago. They've taken control of the main command center and are systematically searching all buildings. Our forces? Scattered and disorganized. These bastards knew exactly when and where to hit us. They've jammed our standard communications frequencies and isolated different sections of the facility." "The Secretary and the Joint Chiefs?" Jackson's expression darkened further. "That's where it gets interesting, sir. They were evacuated by helicopter 10 minutes ago. Not by our people, but by another team that arrived with the main assault force." "Extracted or captured?" Mitchell asked, voicing Harrington's own concern. "Impossible to tell," Jackson admitted. "The weather cleared just enough for the helo to get out, then closed in again." Harrington absorbed this information quickly, his tactical mind already formulating responses. "And Major Davis?" "Last I saw, he was organizing a defensive position at the East Motor Pool. Then communications went down. The implications were clear. They were isolated, cut off from their forces, with unknown hostiles controlling most of the facility. And the very people who might have ordered this assault, the Secretary and General Westmoreland, were now beyond their reach. "The old Warhorse?" Harrington asked, moving deeper into the hangar. Jackson's expression brightened slightly. "Ready and waiting, sir. Full ammunition load, fuel tanks topped off. I even found two of her original crew who happened to be on base for the demonstration." The massive hangar space opened it up before them, and there it stood, the M1 Abrams that Harrington had commanded in Desert Storm. Despite the damage it had sustained earlier in the day, the tank had been quickly restored to operational condition. Its main gun was elevated slightly, the barrel gleaming even in the dim light of the hangar. Two men in standard-issue coveralls stood beside the tank, snapping to attention as they recognized Harrington. "Sir," they called in unison. Harrington recognized them immediately. Staff Sergeant Michael Rivera had been his driver in Iraq, while Specialist Timothy Chen had served as his loader. Both had aged, of course, but they still carried themselves with the disciplined posture of tank crewmen. "At ease," Harrington acknowledged them. "Good to see you both." "Never thought we'd crew together again, Colonel," Rivera said, a grim smile on his weathered face. "Especially not like this." "The situation is complex," Harrington stated, choosing his words carefully. "What did Jackson tell you?" "That American soil is under attack, sir," Chen replied firmly, "and that you needed your old crew back together." Harrington nodded, grateful for their loyalty, but conscious of the moral complexity of what might lie ahead. The people attacking this facility appear to be American special operators or contractors. If we engage them, we may be firing on our own. Rivera and Chen exchanged glances, then looked back to Harrington with unwavering resolve. "With respect, sir," Rivera said, "anyone attacking this base without proper identification or authorization isn't our own anymore. They're hostiles, plain and simple." "Damn right," Chen added. "The oath is to the Constitution, not to whoever's giving these assholes their orders." Their certainty helped solidify Harrington's own resolve. He turned to Mitchell, who had been silently observing the exchange. "Captain, you're our gunner. I'll command. Jackson, you coordinate communications and intelligence from here. We need to find Davis and rally whatever forces we can." "Sir," Mitchell began hesitantly. "I'm not sure I should—" "Save it, Captain," Harrington cut her off. "You wanted redemption? This is your chance. Now mount up." Without further discussion, they moved to their positions. Harrington climbed up the tank's hull with practiced ease, dropping into the commander's position through the open hatch. The familiar confines of the turret brought back a flood of memories. The heat of the Iraqi desert, the thunder of the main gun, the camaraderie of men facing death together. Mitchell settled into the gunner's seat, her hands moving instinctively over the fire control systems. Rivera took his position in the driver's compartment, while Chen prepared the loader's station, organizing the various ammunition types for quick access. "Com check," Harrington called, adjusting his headset. "Driver ready," Rivera responded. "Gunner ready," Mitchell added. "Loader ready," Chen confirmed. Harrington felt a sense of rightness settle over him, despite the dire circumstances. This was where he belonged, in command of a tank, with a crew he trusted, facing a clear objective. "Start her up," he ordered. Rivera engaged the turbine engine, and the Abrams roared to life, its distinctive high-pitched whine filling the hangar. The tank's systems came online one by one, displays illuminating in the dim interior. "Jackson," Harrington called through the open hatch. "Find Davis. Tell him to rally any available forces at the main parade ground, and see if you can restore any communication with the outside world. Someone needs to know what's happening here." "Yes, sir," Jackson acknowledged, already moving toward the hangar's communication station. "Ammunition status?" Harrington asked, turning his attention back to his crew. 6 heat rounds, 12 sabot, 24 canister, Chen reported. "Full load of cokes and 50 cal. "Good. Mitchell, run a full systems check on the fire control." As Mitchell worked through the diagnostic sequence, Harrington continued organizing his thoughts, developing a plan that would allow them to regain control of the facility without excessive casualties, if such a thing was possible. "All systems operational, sir," Mitchell reported after a moment. "Targeting computer-aligned, stabilization systems responding normally." "Rivera, take us to the east entrance," Harrington ordered. "Slow and steady. We want to be deliberate in our movements until we know exactly what we're facing." "Yes, sir." The tank lurched forward, its massive weight settling into smooth motion as Rivera guided it toward the hangar's side door. Jackson moved ahead, operating the controls to open the large access panel designed for vehicle movement. Rain continued to pour outside, the storm showing no signs of abating. The tactical advantage this provided was significant. Reduced visibility would make it harder for the hostile forces to track and target them. "Listen up," Harrington addressed his crew as they prepared to exit the hangar. Our priorities are to locate Major Davis, assess the hostile force strength and disposition, and secure the command center. We avoid casualties where possible, but make no mistake, these forces have invaded a United States military facility and must be treated as hostile combatants. Sir, Mitchell spoke up, her voice steady over the intercom. What about the data, the files on Operation Scorpion? Harrington patted his breast pocket where he had secured the drive containing the downloaded files. Safe for now, but it's not just about the data anymore. This attack confirms everything we suspected and more. Someone is willing to assault a U.S. Army facility on American soil to keep this information buried. The tank rolled forward into the storm, its treads gripping the wet pavement with inexorable purpose. Visibility was poor, but the Abrams thermal imaging systems cut through the rain, revealing the layout of the facility in ghostly green and white contrasts. Movement? 2 o'clock, Mitchell reported, the targeting system already swiveling the main gun toward the potential threat. Through the commander's independent thermal viewer, Harrington identified a group of 4 men in tactical gear moving between buildings approximately 300 meters away. Hold fire, he ordered. They haven't spotted us yet. Rivera, cut your lights and take us behind the maintenance shed at 1 o'clock. We'll observe their movement before engaging. The tank moved silently into position, its dark bulk nearly invisible in the storm. From their concealed location, they watched as the tactical team methodically searched building after building. They're looking for us, Mitchell observed quietly. Not just us, Harrington corrected. Anyone who might have accessed those servers or witnessed their assault. They're sanitizing the entire facility. The cold precision with which the team operated confirmed Harrington's assessment. These weren't terrorists or even mercenaries. They moved with the disciplined efficiency of elite military operators. Sir, Rivera called from the driver's position, I've got multiple vehicles approaching from the north. Heavy engines, sounds like our Humvees. Harrington swiveled his optics to the north road and confirmed Rivera's assessment. 3 Humvees were moving cautiously toward their position, their headlights off, clearly attempting to maintain tactical surprise. Mitchell, keep the main gun on those foot mobiles. I'll assess the approaching vehicles. He zoomed in on the lead Humvee, searching for identifying features or personnel. His heart lifted when he recognized Major Davis in the passenger seat of the lead vehicle, directing the small convoy with hand signals. Friendly forces, Harrington announced. Rivera, flash your running lights once. Quick burst. Let them know we're here. Rivera complied, and the brief flash of light from the tank's position was enough to alert Davis's team. The Humvees adjusted course slightly, heading directly for their position. As the vehicles pulled alongside the tank, Davis jumped out and approached, crouching low as if expecting sniper fire despite the poor visibility. Colonel, he called up to Harrington, relief evident in his voice despite the tension of the situation. Thank God. We thought you might have been captured. Status report, Harrington demanded, keeping his focus on the tactical situation. I've managed to rally 32 personnel, sir. Mixture of security teams and regular staff with combat training. We've secured the East Motor Pool and Armory, giving us access to additional weapons and 4 more Humvees. Casualties? Davis's expression darkened. 12 confirmed dead, sir. These bastards are shooting anyone who resists. No attempts to capture or subdue, they're executing a sweep and clear operation. The brutality of the assault reinforced Harrington's growing conviction that this was no ordinary military operation. This was a black operation, unsanctioned, deniable, and lethal. Have you identified their command structure or communication patterns? Harrington asked. Negative, sir. They're running tight comm discipline, probably encrypted channels, but they're definitely taking orders from someone, and their operations are too coordinated for independent teams. Harrington made his decision. We need to take back the command center. From there, we can access the facility-wide announcement system and potentially restore external communications. Sir, Davis hesitated. The command center is their strongest position. At least 10 operators, heavily armed, with clear fields of fire on all approaches. That's why they won't expect us to hit it directly, Harrington replied, a cold determination in his voice. And that's why we have this. He patted the tank's turret meaningfully. Understanding dawned in Davis's eyes. A direct assault, using the tank as our battering ram. Exactly, your Humvees will provide flanking support. We'll approach from the south road, using the administration building as cover for most of the advance. Once we break into the open, we'll move at maximum speed. The tank will draw their fire while your teams target any defensive positions. Davis nodded, already mentally working through the tactical details. And once we secure the command center, then we find out who's running this operation and shut it down permanently. As Davis returned to his vehicles to brief his teams, Harrington ducked back inside the tank to update his crew. Change of plans. We're assaulting the command center directly. Rivera, you'll take us along the south access road. Maximum speed once we clear the administration building. Mitchell, your primary targets will be any heavy weapons positions or vehicles. Chen, load heat rounds and be prepared for rapid-fire succession. The crew acknowledged their orders with professional efficiency, each preparing for the coming engagement. Harrington could feel the familiar pre-battle tension settling over them. Not fear exactly, but the heightened awareness that comes when men know they are about to risk their lives. One more thing, Harrington added, his voice solemn. If I'm incapacitated for any reason, Captain Mitchell assumes command. Her knowledge of the facility and the situation is vital to our success. There was a moment of silence as the implications of this order settled. Mitchell herself seemed startled by the designation, but she nodded in acknowledgement of the responsibility. All teams ready, sir, Davis reported over the radio, awaiting your signal. Harrington took one final moment to consider what they were about to do. They were preparing to engage an unknown force on American soil, a force that might well include American Special Operations personnel operating under classified orders. The legal and moral implications were staggering, but the alternative, allowing these forces to complete their apparent mission of eliminating all witnesses and evidence, was unacceptable. All units, execute Operation Thunderbolt, he ordered, using the designation they had quickly established for the assault plan. Weapons free, discriminate targets. Remember, we want to capture their leadership if possible. The tank lurched forward, leading the formation of Humvees through the driving rain. They moved quickly along the designated route, the storm providing continued cover for their approach. As they neared the end of the administration building, the command center came into view across approximately 200 meters of open ground. The two-story structure was heavily defended, with barricades established at all main entrances and armed personnel visible at various firing positions. A communications array had been established on the roof, likely their command and control center. All units, prepare to execute final assault, Harrington commanded. On my mark, execute, execute, execute. Rivera gunned the engine, and the Abrams surged forward with surprising speed for such a massive vehicle. Simultaneously, the Humvees broke from cover, spreading out to present multiple targets as they charged across the open ground. The reaction from the defenders was immediate. Automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions, tracer rounds cutting through the rain like deadly lightning. Target, barricade at main entrance, Harrington directed. Identified, Mitchell confirmed, the main gun already tracking. Fire! The 120mm cannon roared, sending a heat round directly into the hastily established barricade. The explosion obliterated the position, sending debris and bodies flying. The Humvees opened fire with their mounted weapons, suppressing the defenders on the flanks as the tank continued its direct approach. Small arms fire pinged harmlessly off the Abrams' heavy armor. Second target, roof communications array, Harrington ordered as they closed the distance. Mitchell adjusted the gun elevation and fired again. The shell impacted with devastating precision, destroying the array in a shower of twisted metal and electronic components. As they reached the building itself, Rivera expertly maneuvered the tank to present its most heavily armored front toward the remaining defenders, providing cover for Davis's forces as they dismounted and prepared to enter the structure. All units, breach and clear, Harrington ordered. We'll maintain position here and suppress any counterattack. Davis led the infantry assault, his men moving with disciplined precision as they entered the building through multiple access points. The sounds of gunfire echoed from inside, punctuated by the distinctive crump of flashbang grenades. For several tense minutes, Harrington maintained his position in the commander's hatch, scanning for any additional threats while monitoring the progress of the assault teams via radio. The rain continued to pour, steam rising from the tank's hot engine compartment as water struck its heated surfaces. Command center secured, Davis's voice finally came through the radio. All hostiles either neutralized or captured. You need to see this, sir. Mitchell, you have command of the tank, Harrington ordered, already climbing out of his hatch. Maintain vigilance. This isn't over yet. He dropped to the ground and moved quickly toward the building, sidearm drawn. Inside, the evidence of the fierce but brief battle was everywhere. Bullet holes scarring the walls, shell casings littering the floor, the acrid smell of gunpowder hanging in the air. Davis met him at the entrance to the main operations room. 3 prisoners, sir, 2 operators, and what appears to be their commander. Plus, we found something unusual. Harrington followed him into the room where Davis's men had secured the surviving hostiles. 2 were standard operators, similar to those they had encountered earlier. But the third, clearly the leader, was a face Harrington recognized immediately. Colonel Richard Hayes, Harrington said, genuine surprise in his voice. Joint Special Operations Command. Hayes looked up from where he sat, zip-tied to a chair, blood seeping from a wound on his forehead. Despite his compromised position, he maintained the arrogant bearing that had always characterized his interactions with regular Army officers. Harrington, he acknowledged coldly, you have no idea what you've done here today. I was about to say the same to you, Harrington replied, his voice hard with controlled anger. Assaulting an American military facility? Killing the American soldiers? That's treason by any definition. It's national security, Hayes countered. You accessed classified materials you had no authorization to see. Materials that could compromise ongoing operations and diplomatic initiatives. Diplomatic initiatives? Harrington laughed bitterly. Is that what we're calling cover-ups these days? Hayes's expression remained impassive. You're out of your depth, Colonel. This goes higher than you can imagine. Sir, Davis interrupted, you need to see this. He led Harrington to a side room that had been converted into an improvised communications center. Inside, sophisticated equipment had been set up, far beyond standard military issue. Multiple screens displayed tactical information, communication logs, and most disturbingly, personnel files of Rockwell facility staff, with Harrington's highlighted in red. They had detailed intelligence on all of us, Davis explained grimly. Backgrounds, psychological profiles, family information. They knew exactly who to target and how. Harrington studied the displays, his military mind quickly processing the implications. This wasn't a hasty response to our discovering those files. This operation was planned well in advance, probably as a contingency if Blackwood failed. Which means they knew about Blackwood's plans all along, Davis concluded. They could have stopped him, prevented those deaths this morning, but they let it happen. Why? Because it gave them the perfect pretext for this, Harrington realized. A terrorist attack on a military facility creates confusion, diverts attention. The perfect cover for their own operation to eliminate everyone who might have accessed those servers. He turned back toward the main room where Hayes was being held. And now we're going to find out exactly who authorized this and why Operation Scorpion was worth killing American soldiers to cover up. As he re-entered the room, a distant rumbling sound caught his attention. At first, he thought it might be thunder from the continuing storm, but the rhythm was too regular, too mechanical. Helicopters. Davis identified it first, moving quickly to the window. Multiple heavy lift birds coming in from the northeast. Harrington joined him at the window, straining to see through the rain. The distinctive silhouettes of CH-47 Chinooks were just becoming visible, at least 4 of them approaching in tight formation, despite the dangerous flying conditions. Now what? Davis muttered. Harrington turned to Hayes, who was watching their reaction with a cold smile. Your reinforcements, Colonel? Not mine, Hayes replied. Yours, or rather the official response force. Probably elements of the 10th Mountain Division from Fort Drum. The Secretary of Defense would have authorized their deployment as soon as he was safely extracted from the terrorist attack on this facility. The implication was clear. Once those troops landed, Hayes and his men would disappear into the system, the evidence of their operation buried under layers of classification and national security protocols. Davis, Harrington ordered, his voice tight with urgency. Get everyone back to the vehicles. We're leaving. Sir? Davis questioned, clearly surprised by the order. Those aren't our reinforcements. They're our replacements, Harrington explained grimly. Once they secure this facility, the official narrative takes over. Blackwood's attack, our discovery of Operation Scorpion, Hayes' assault, it all gets classified and buried. And anyone who knows the truth becomes a liability. Understanding dawned in Davis's eyes. Where do we go? Harrington glanced at Hayes, who was watching their exchange with calculated interest. First, we take our guest here somewhere quiet for a more detailed conversation. Then we find someone who can't be silenced or bought. Someone who can ensure the truth comes out regardless of who tries to suppress it. And that would be, Davis pressed. Harrington's expression hardened with resolve. My son. If I'm right about what he's been investigating, he's been hunting the same truth we stumbled upon today. And unlike us, he has the resources and connections to do something about it. He turned to Hayes, who had lost some of his composure at the mention of Harrington's son. Something tells me Colonel Hayes here knows exactly who I'm talking about, don't you, Richard? Hayes's silence was confirmation enough. Whatever Operation Scorpion truly was, whatever had happened to those 8 men in Iran 3 years ago, Robert Harrington was somehow connected to it. Davis, secure the prisoner. Mitchell and Jackson will remain with the tank. You and I will take Hayes in one of the Humvees. The rest of our people should scatter in small groups. Harder to track that way. And the helicopters? Harrington checked his watch. They're still 5 minutes out at least. Plenty of time for us to disappear into this storm. As Davis moved to carry out his orders, Harrington approached Hayes and crouched to eye level with the bound man. One way or another, Colonel, the truth about Operation Scorpion is coming out. The only question is whether you'll be remembered as part of the cover-up or part of the solution. Think about that during our little road trip. Hayes met his gaze without flinching. You have no idea what forces you're challenging, Harrington. No idea at all. Maybe not, Harrington acknowledged, rising to his feet. But I've spent my entire life fighting for this country, for the principles it claims to stand for. If those principles mean anything, then the truth matters, no matter how uncomfortable it might be for those in power. Outside, the storm continued unabated, the rain washing away the blood and spent shell casings that marked the day's violence. As Harrington prepared to leave the facility he had commanded for 5 years, he felt a strange mix of emotions. Regret for the lives lost, anger at the betrayal by those he had trusted, but most of all, a steely determination to see this through to the end. The old Warhorse would remain behind, a silent sentinel waiting for his return. For now, the battle would continue on different ground with different weapons, but the stakes remained the same. Truth against deception, honor against expediency, the values of the Constitution against the corrupting influence of power. As the helicopter rotors grew louder, Colonel William Harrington stepped out into the storm, ready to face whatever came next in this war that had unexpectedly found him on what should have been an ordinary day at Rockwell Ridge. The storm had finally broken. Dawn light filtered through dissipating clouds as the battered Humvee followed a winding mountain road deeper into the Montana wilderness. Colonel William Harrington sat in the passenger seat, his weathered face carved with exhaustion, yet alert, eyes constantly scanning the terrain. 8 hours had passed since their desperate escape from Rockwell Ridge. In the driver's seat, Major Thomas Davis maintained a vigilant silence, his focus on the treacherous road. The rain had transformed dirt tracks into muddy channels, making progress slow and hazardous. Behind them, their unwilling passenger, Colonel Richard Hayes, sat bound and under guard, his expression a mixture of contempt and calculation. "How much further?" Davis asked, breaking the silence. Harrington checked the handheld GPS unit. 3 miles to the coordinates. If Robert's message was accurate, we should find his safe house just over the next ridge. The communication from his son had arrived unexpectedly 6 hours earlier. A brief, encrypted message relayed through channels so obscure that even Hayes had been surprised. It contained only geographic coordinates, a time, and a simple authentication code known only between father and son. "And you're sure he'll be there? Sure this isn't a trap?" Davis glanced in the rearview mirror at Hayes. "If my son sent the message, he'll be there," Harrington replied with quiet certainty, "and he'll have resources we need." They rounded a bend in the road and Harrington signaled Davis to stop. "Pull over here. We go on foot from this point." Davis guided the vehicle into the cover of dense pines and cut the engine. The sudden silence felt oppressive after hours of mechanical noise. "Wake our guest," Harrington ordered, checking his sidearm before exiting the vehicle. Davis roused Hayes, who had been feigning sleep. "End of the line, Colonel. We're walking from here." "Into the wilderness to meet your son's ghosts?" Hayes commented dryly. "You're more desperate than I thought, Harrington." Harrington ignored the barb. "Move him out. Secure restraints, but give him enough mobility to hike. We have about a mile through rough country." They gathered essential equipment and began their trek through the dense forest. Despite his bound hands, Hayes moved with the efficiency of a man accustomed to wilderness operations. Harrington led the way, moving with the measured pace of a veteran soldier, conserving energy for whatever might lie ahead. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds sang, no wildlife scattered at their approach. It was the unnatural silence that experienced operators recognized as a warning this area was being monitored. After 20 minutes of steady hiking, they reached a small clearing. A simple cabin stood at its center, weathered logs giving it the appearance of a hunter's retreat. No vehicles were visible, no signs of occupation except thin smoke rising from the stone chimney. Harrington halted at the edge of the clearing, scanning methodically for threats or surveillance. Nothing moved, yet the prickling sensation at the base of his neck, the sixth sense developed over decades of combat, told him they were being watched. "Cover our six," he instructed Davis. "I'll approach first." He stepped into the clearing, making no attempt at stealth, his empty hands clearly visible. 10 yards from the cabin, the door opened. The man who emerged was leaner than Harrington remembered, his face harder, the boyish features of the son he'd known, replaced by the chiseled angles of a warrior. Major Robert Harrington wore no uniform, just tactical pants and a weathered jacket, but his bearing was unmistakably military. "Hello, Dad," he said, his voice controlled but not cold. "Robert," the elder Harrington acknowledged with a nod that conveyed both professional respect and fatherly pride. Robert's eyes shifted to the tree line. "I see you brought company." "Major Davis, my XO from Rockwell," William explained, "and a guest who has some explaining to do." Robert's expression darkened at the mention of Hayes. "You've been busy. The official story is that you went rogue after a terrorist attack, killed American soldiers, and kidnapped a JSOC officer." "And what do you believe?" William asked, studying his son carefully. "That there's more to the story, otherwise I wouldn't have sent those coordinates." Robert gestured toward the cabin. "Bring them in, we don't have much time." Inside, the cabin's rustic exterior gave way to sophisticated technology. Multiple computer screens displayed satellite imagery, communications monitoring, and what appeared to be live feeds from Rockwell Ridge, now swarming with military personnel in standard Army uniforms. Two other individuals occupied the room. A woman in her 30s sat at the communications array, her focus absolute as her fingers danced across multiple keyboards. A heavy-set man with the bearing of a former operator maintained a watchful position near a rack of weapons that would have been illegal in most states. "My team," Robert explained simply. "Maya Chen, our tech specialist, former NSA, until she asked too many questions, and Jim Blackburn, former Delta." Hayes stiffened at the introductions, recognition flashing across his face. "Chen, you were discharged for unauthorized access to classified materials." Maya didn't look up from her screens. "Fancy term for discovering that someone was using NSA resources to track and eliminate American operatives, Colonel." "You're all making a grave mistake," Hayes said, his voice cold with authority despite his bound hands. "This is a matter of national security that goes far beyond what you think you know." "Sit him down," Robert ordered Blackburn, who moved with surprising speed for his size, securing Hayes to a reinforced chair bolted to the floor. Robert turned to his father. "You found something at Rockwell, something connected to Operation Scorpion." It wasn't a question. William removed the data drive from his pocket, handling it with the care one might give a live grenade. Everything Blackwood had collected, the operational files, the cover-up, the connections leading to Secretary Kelso and General Westmoreland. Robert accepted the drive, examining it briefly before passing it to Maya. "Complete copy?" "As complete as we could manage before Hayes and his team arrived to sanitize the facility," William confirmed. "You already knew about Scorpion." "We've been investigating for 18 months, Robert acknowledged, gesturing for the others to sit at a rough wooden table near the center of the room. "My team was tasked with tracking nuclear materials being smuggled through Iran. We kept finding references to an operation that had gone bad 3 years ago. A team sent in on faulty intelligence, all lost. When I dug deeper, I discovered the team leader was Marcus Blackwood, Jr. "Your former commander's son," William said, connecting the pieces. "So you started looking into what really happened and found layers of classification and active measures to prevent anyone from accessing the truth," Robert confirmed. "The more barriers we encountered, the more convinced we became that this wasn't just a failed operation being buried to save face. There was something else." "The intelligence source," William suggested. "Monarch." Robert's eyes widened slightly. "You know about that designation?" "It was in the files. Secretary of Defense Kelso was Monarch when he was at CIA. He provided the intelligence that sent those men into an ambush. And then buried the evidence when questions arose," Robert added grimly. "But there's more. We believe the team wasn't killed in the ambush. At least, not all of them." A tense silence filled the room. Even Hayes seemed surprised by this revelation. "Our intelligence indicates that at least 3 members of the team were captured alive," Robert continued, "held by Iranian forces for interrogation, then transferred to a black site operated by a third party. What third party? William demanded. Robert's expression was grave. A private military corporation with deep connections to certain elements within our own intelligence community, Helix Global Security. The name hit William like a physical blow. Helix was one of the largest private military contractors in the world, with operations spanning dozens of countries. They had worked alongside American forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, often taking on missions too sensitive or politically risky for regular military units. Kelso sits on their board of directors, William realized, or did before his appointment as secretary. Precisely, Robert confirmed. And Helix had been running its own operation in Iran, using the nuclear smuggling network as cover for something bigger. When Blackwood's team stumbled onto it, they became a liability. So Kelso deliberately sent them into a trap, Davis interjected, his voice tight with controlled anger. American soldiers sacrificed to protect a corporate operation. And when Marcus Blackwood Sr. started asking questions, they fed him just enough information to point him toward Rockwell, knowing he would take action, William concluded, creating the perfect pretext for Hayes and his team to eliminate everyone who might have accessed those servers. A cleaning operation disguised as a response to a terrorist attack. Hayes laughed coldly from his restrained position. An impressive theory, Major, built on assumptions and conjecture. You have no proof that would stand up in any court or congressional hearing. That's where you're wrong, Colonel, Robert replied calmly. Maya, show them what we found. The tech specialist tapped several keys, and one of the large screens displayed a satellite image of a remote compound nestled in the mountains of northern Pakistan. This facility is officially listed as a training center for Helix Global Security, Robert explained. But our surveillance shows it's actually a detention and interrogation site. And 3 weeks ago, we intercepted communications indicating the transfer of high-value assets who had been held for approximately 3 years. Blackwood's men, William breathed. They're still alive. Some of them, Robert corrected. We've positively identified 2. Captain James Mitchell and Sergeant Paul Rodriguez. The third survivor's identity remains unconfirmed. At the mention of Mitchell, Davis straightened. Mitchell, any relation to Captain Sarah Mitchell from our command? Her brother, William confirmed, the pieces falling into place. That's why she joined Blackwood's operation. She suspected her brother was still alive. And now we have proof, Robert said, nodding to Maya. Maya, who brought up intercepted communications logs and surveillance photos. Enough to justify a rescue operation, but not enough to move through official channels. Not when the Secretary of Defense himself is implicated. William studied the facility's layout on the screen, his tactical mind already analyzing approach vectors and defensive positions. You're planning to extract them. We were, Robert acknowledged, until everything accelerated with Blackwood's attack and your discovery of the files. Now Kelso knows we're closing in. He's already moved to eliminate witnesses at Rockwell. The prisoners will be his next priority. Then we need to move quickly, William decided, his voice taking on the commanding tone that had directed tank battalions in combat. What resources do you have? Robert exchanged glances with Blackburn. A small team, 6 operators, all former special forces with personal connections to men lost in Operation Scorpion. Limited equipment. We were planning an insertion via halo jump from a private aircraft registered to a shell company. A suicide mission, Hayes commented from his chair. Even if you reach the facility, you'll never extract with prisoners. Helix's security forces are former Tier 1 operators, with air support and satellite surveillance. He's right, William acknowledged reluctantly. You need more firepower, a diversion, and an extraction plan with redundancies. Robert's expression was grim. We're aware of the odds, but these are our brothers. We leave no one behind. The words resonated with William, the old soldier's creed that had guided his entire career. Never abandon your men. He looked at his son with newfound respect, seeing not just the boy he had raised, but the commander he had become, willing to risk everything for the principles they both held sacred. You're not going alone, William declared, his decision made. I'm coming with you, and I know how to even the odds. Hayes laughed from his chair. You're 65 years old, Colonel. This isn't Desert Storm, and you're not leading a tank battalion anymore. William turned to Hayes with cold determination. You're right, this time I only need 1 tank. Davis understood immediately. The old Warhorse. William nodded. With Jackson, Mitchell, and the original crew. 5 Abrams are still operational at Rockwell, but only one is being kept separate for forensic analysis, our tank. The one piece of heavy equipment not under direct control of Kelso's people. You're talking about us stealing a 70-ton main battle tank from a U.S. military facility, Hayes said incredulously, and somehow transporting it halfway around the world to attack a facility operated by American contractors. That's not just suicide, it's treason. No, Colonel, William replied, his voice steady with conviction. Treason is sending American soldiers into an ambush to protect corporate interests. Treason is imprisoning those who survive to hide your crimes. Treason is attacking an American military facility to silence witnesses. He leaned closer to Hayes. What we're planning is called justice. Robert studied his father, a mix of emotions playing across his features. Even if we could secure the tank, how would we transport it to Pakistan? We don't have those kinds of resources. But we know someone who does, William replied. Someone with both the means and the motivation to help us. Understanding dawned in Robert's eyes. Senator Catherine Westlake. William nodded. Chair of the Armed Services Committee and Marcus Blackwood's sister-in-law. She's been pushing for an investigation into her nephew's death for years, only to be stonewalled at every turn. With the evidence we now have, she'll have the leverage to help us, quietly. And you think she'll risk her career to support what amounts to an unauthorized military operation on foreign soil? Davis asked skeptically. I think she'll do whatever it takes to learn the truth about what happened to her nephew and bring those responsible to justice, William replied, especially when she sees what's on that drive. Robert considered this for a long moment, then nodded to Maya. Get me a secure line to Senator Westlake's private office. Use the protocol we established last year. As Maya worked, William turned to his son. We'll need to contact Jackson and Mitchell. They're still at Rockwell with the tank, maintaining position until they hear from us. Already ahead of you, Robert replied, gesturing to one of the screens displaying a secure messaging interface. I established contact an hour ago. They're ready to move on your order. William felt a surge of pride at his son's efficiency. The distance that had grown between them over the years, the arguments, the recriminations after Jennifer's death, seemed to fade in the face of their shared purpose. Tell them to prepare for extraction at 0200 hours, he instructed. We'll need diversionary actions on the east perimeter to draw attention away from the secure hangar. As Robert relayed the orders, Maya called from her station. Connection established with Senator Westlake. Encryption protocols active. A new screen flickered to life, displaying the stern face of Senator Catherine Westlake, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to wielding power. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of William. Colonel Harrington, I was told you had gone rogue, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Senator, I imagine there are quite a few stories circulating about me at the moment, William replied. None of them accurate. I'm listening, she said simply. For the next 15 minutes, William and Robert laid out everything they had discovered. Operation Scorpion, Secretary Kelso's involvement, the captured soldiers still being held, and the attack on Rockwell Ridge. As they spoke, Maya transmitted selected files from the data drive, displaying them on the senator's screen. Westlake's expression remained composed, but her eyes grew harder with each revelation. When they finished, she was silent for a long moment. My nephew, she finally said. Was he killed in the ambush, or is he one of the prisoners? William exchanged glances with Robert. We don't have confirmation either way, Senator. But with your help, we can find out. What exactly are you asking of me, Colonel? Transportation for the small team and specialized equipment to a forward operating position near the Pakistani border. Diplomatic cover for our operation. And most importantly, your commitment to take this evidence public if we don't return. Westlake's eyes narrowed. You realize that what you're planning could be construed as an act of war? Unauthorized military action on foreign soil? We're not going as representatives of the U.S. military, William clarified. This is a private extraction of American citizens being illegally detained. No different from dozens of operations conducted by private military contractors like Helix every year. Except you're planning to bring an American main battle tank to the party, Westlake observed dryly. A necessary element for success, given the facility's defenses, Robert interjected. Our intelligence indicates reinforced positions, heavy weapons, and at least 30 professional operators on site. Westlake considered this, then nodded slowly. I have connections with certain NGOs operating in the region. They maintain aircraft capable of transporting heavy equipment for humanitarian missions. As for diplomatic cover, I sit on a subcommittee overseeing military aid to Pakistan. A small inspection team visiting existing facilities would raise few eyebrows. William felt the first stirrings of hope, and the evidence will be secured with multiple copies held by individuals I trust implicitly, Westlake assured him. If you don't return, or if anything happens to me, it all becomes public simultaneously through various channels. Kelso and his allies won't be able to contain it. Thank you, Senator, William said with genuine gratitude. Don't thank me yet, Colonel, she replied grimly. I'm not doing this just for you or even for my nephew. I'm doing it because the American people deserve to know when their trust has been betrayed by those sworn to protect them. Her eyes hardened. Bring me proof. Bring me witnesses. And most importantly, bring back those soldiers, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, William echoed, the words feeling like a vow. The connection ended, and the room fell into tense silence. Even Hayes seemed subdued, the reality of what was unfolding clearly exceeding his expectations. Maya, Robert said after a moment, coordinate with the senator's office for transport arrangements. Jim, prep the team for deployment and brief them on the new parameters. We'll need to adjust our infiltration plan to accommodate the tank. As they moved to carry out their tasks, Davis approached William. Sir, what about Hayes? We can't take him with us, and we can't let him go. William considered the JSOC officer, who met his gaze with cold defiance. He stays here, secured and monitored. If we succeed, he becomes a witness. If we fail, he becomes evidence. Hayes laughed bitterly. You really think this changes anything? Even if you reach that facility, even if you find those men alive, Kelso has contingencies. People like him always do. Perhaps, William acknowledged. But people like him also forget something important about soldiers like us. We don't fight because we think we'll win. We fight because some things are worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. He turned away from Hayes, focusing instead on the tactical display of the Helix facility. For the next hour, he and Robert worked together, developing a plan that incorporated both the special operations approach Robert had originally envisioned and the armored assault capabilities that the Abrams would provide. As they worked, William felt a curious sense of rightness. After years of distance, he and his son were fighting side by side, their different backgrounds and trainings complementing each other perfectly. Robert's Special Forces expertise balancing William's armored warfare experience. In the midst of crisis and danger, they had found common ground. This approach vector gives us the best combination of cover and firing positions for the tank, William indicated on the display. The ridgeline provides hull-down positioning, giving us maximum protection while maintaining fire superiority over the main gate and guard towers. Robert nodded in agreement. My team will insert here, using the tank's assault as a diversion to breach the southeast wall. We'll locate and extract the prisoners while you keep their QRF occupied. Once you've secured the prisoners, pull back to this position, William continued, marking a point roughly half a mile from the facility. We'll provide covering fire during your exfiltration, then fall back ourselves to the extraction point. Davis, who had been observing their planning, interjected. Sir, with respect, getting the tank out will be problematic once they bring air assets to bear. We don't extract the tank, William stated matter-of-factly. Once its mission is complete, we rig it for demolition. Robert looked up sharply. The old Warhorse? You'd destroy it? William felt a pang at the thought, but pushed it aside. It's just a machine, son. The men we're trying to save, they're what matters. Robert studied his father for a long moment, then nodded in understanding. The lesson wasn't lost on him. The willingness to sacrifice something precious for a higher purpose. Maya's voice interrupted their planning. Transport confirmed. A C-17 operated by Global Relief Initiatives will be waiting at a private airfield 60 miles from here. Departure in 6 hours. Senator Westlake has arranged all necessary clearances and documentation. And our equipment? Robert asked. The senator's people are gathering what we need, Maya confirmed. Additional weapons, communications gear, medical supplies. Everything will be waiting at the airfield. William checked his watch. Then we move in 3 hours. First objective, extracting our tank from Rockwell Ridge. As the others continued their preparations, William stepped outside the cabin, needing a moment alone. The mountain air was crisp and clean, so different from the desert battlefields where he had spent much of his career. Above, stars were beginning to appear as darkness fell. He thought of Jennifer, gone now for 10 years. What would she think of what he was planning? The risk he was taking? The line he was crossing? He could almost hear her voice. You always did what you believed was right, Will, even when it cost you. The cost had been high over the years. Time away from family, friends lost in combat, the strain on his marriage. But he had always believed in the principles he was fighting for. And now in what might be his final mission, those principles were clearer than ever. The cabin door opened behind him, and Robert stepped out, offering a steaming mug of coffee. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, father and son united in purpose, if not yet fully reconciled. "Why didn't you tell me you were investigating Operation Scorpion?" William finally asked. "I could have helped." Robert took a sip of his coffee before answering. "I wanted to, but after Mom died." He paused, searching for words. "I blamed you for not being there, for choosing the mission over family. I didn't want to give you the satisfaction of knowing I'd followed in your footsteps after all." The honesty stung, but William appreciated it. "Your mother understood why I couldn't leave my command during the surge. She didn't like it, but she understood." "I know that now," Robert acknowledged. "It took becoming a commander myself to realize there are no easy choices. That responsibility sometimes means disappointing the people you love to protect the people who depend on you." William nodded, a weight lifting from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. Perhaps that was enough. "We should get back inside," Robert said after another moment of silence. "Still a lot to coordinate before we move." "One thing first," William said, turning to face his son directly. "Whatever happens at that facility, your mission is to get those prisoners out. That's the priority. If things go sideways with the tank, if I can't extract—" "Dad," Robert began to protest. "Listen to me," William cut him off firmly. "Those men have been prisoners for 3 years. They come home, no matter what. That's the mission. Are we clear?" Robert straightened slightly, unconsciously falling into the military bearing that was second nature to them both. "Yes, sir. Clear." William clasped his son's shoulder. "Good. Now let's go steal a tank." The extraction of the Abrams from Rockwell Ridge proceeded with precision that would have made any special operations team proud. Using the diversion created by Jackson and a small team of loyal personnel, they breached the perimeter of the secure hangar where the old Warhorse was being held for forensic examination. Mitchell, having already prepared the tank for immediate operation, had it rolling within minutes of their arrival. The night's darkness and a convenient power outage affecting the facility's eastern quadrant provided cover as they guided the massive vehicle through a maintenance gate and onto a service road leading away from the base. A tense hour followed as they navigated back roads, avoiding main highways where the distinctive profile of an M1 Abrams would immediately attract attention. Twice they had to divert to avoid military police checkpoints, adding precious minutes to their timeline. Finally, at a remote location deep in national forest land, they rendezvoused with the heavy equipment transporters Senator Westlake had arranged, commercial vehicles designed for moving construction equipment, now repurposed for a more sensitive cargo. The loading operation was delicate and time-consuming, but by dawn the tank was secured and concealed beneath heavy tarps, its journey to the airfield underway. William rode in the lead vehicle with Robert, Davis, and Mitchell. Jackson had taken position inside the transporter cab with the tank, along with Rivera and Chen, the original crew members who had agreed to join the mission without hesitation when contacted. "Once we're airborne, we'll have approximately 16 hours to finalize our assault plan," Robert explained, reviewing the operational timeline. "The C-17 will drop us at a remote airstrip near the Afghan border. From there, another transport will move us to within 20 miles of the target." "And the tank?" Mitchell asked. "How do we deploy it in hostile territory without being detected?" "Final approach will be at night, using a dry riverbed that provides both cover and a natural avenue of approach to the target area," Robert explained. "Satellite imagery confirms it's passable for the Abrams, though it'll be tight in places." William nodded in approval. The plan was solid, leveraging the natural terrain to compensate for their limited numbers. It reminded him of operations he'd led in Desert Storm, using the contours of the desert to mask tank movements until the critical moment of engagement. "What about the prisoners?" Davis asked. "What condition can we expect them to be in after 3 years of captivity?" Robert's expression darkened. "Unknown. Our intelligence suggests they've been subjected to enhanced interrogation techniques. We're preparing for the possibility that they may not be ambulatory." The implication hung heavy in the air. 3 years of torture would break most men. Whatever they found at that facility, it wouldn't be the soldiers who had originally deployed on Operation Scorpion. It would be the damaged remnants of those men. "I've included 2 combat medics in the extraction team," Robert added. and the senator has arranged for a specialized medical team to meet us at the extraction point. William studied the operational map spread across his knees, mentally rehearsing each phase of the mission. It was ambitious, perhaps even reckless, but they had the element of surprise on their side. No one would expect an Abrams tank to suddenly appear outside a black site in northern Pakistan. We'll need to maintain strict emissions control during the final approach, he noted. The Abrams thermal signature is distinctive, and Helix will have detection equipment. Already addressed, Robert confirmed. We've acquired thermal blankets designed for special forces vehicles. They won't hide the tank completely, but they'll mask enough of the signature to buy us the element of surprise. William nodded, impressed again by his son's thoroughness. Robert had grown into a commander any father would be proud of, meticulous, resourceful, and committed to his men. The convoy continued through the mountain roads, maintaining a careful speed to avoid attracting attention. Occasional updates from Maya, who was monitoring communications from military and law enforcement channels, confirmed that while a search was underway for the missing Abrams, authorities were focusing on areas much closer to Rockwell Ridge. By mid-morning, they reached the private airfield, little more than a long strip of asphalt carved from dense forest with a single hangar and control tower. A massive C-17 Globemaster stood ready, its rear loading ramp already lowered to receive its unusual cargo. Senator Westlake had been true to her word. The necessary equipment was waiting: weapons, tactical gear, communication systems, and the specialized tools they would need for the assault. More importantly, the documentation required for their cover story was impeccable. They were a private security team escorting humanitarian relief equipment for an NGO operating in Pakistan. Loading the tank onto the aircraft was a precise operation that took nearly 2 hours. The Abrams, at nearly 70 tons, pushed the C-17's cargo capacity to its limits. Special reinforced ramps and securing systems had been prepared to ensure the massive vehicle wouldn't shift during flight and compromise the aircraft's balance. As final preparations were completed, William found himself standing at the base of the loading ramp with Mitchell beside him, watching as the crew made last-minute adjustments to the tank's securing mechanisms. "Why did you do it?" he asked quietly, the question that had been lingering since her betrayal and subsequent redemption at Rockwell Ridge. Why help Blackwood, knowing what he planned? Mitchell was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the tank. "When they told me James died in a training accident, I knew it was a lie. The details didn't match. His personal effects were all wrong, items missing that he would never have been without. And then the sealed casket at the funeral." She paused, collecting herself. "I started asking questions, filing requests, getting stonewalled at every turn." "And Blackwood found you," William surmised. She nodded. "He had pieces of evidence I didn't. Satellite imagery, communications logs, enough to convince me that James hadn't died in Germany, that something had happened in Iran." Her voice hardened, "but not enough to prove he might still be alive. That part I only learned after joining his operation, after it was too late to back out." "Yet when it mattered most, you chose to stop Blackwood rather than help him," William observed. "Because he crossed a line," Mitchell replied simply. "Exposing the truth about what happened to our brothers? That I could support. Mass murder of innocent personnel just to get revenge? That made us no better than the people who betrayed those 8 men in the first place." William studied her, seeing not the traitor she had briefly been, but the soldier she had chosen to remain when it counted most. "Your brother might be alive in that facility. You understand that we might not be able to save him? That this mission could fail?" Mitchell met his gaze steadily. "Sir, my brother has been held captive and tortured for 3 years because his own government betrayed him. If there's even a chance of bringing him home, or at least letting him know he wasn't forgotten, then I'll do whatever it takes. Just like you would." William nodded in understanding. Her loyalty had never truly wavered. It had simply been directed at her brother rather than the chain of command that had betrayed them both. "Mount up, Captain," he said, gesturing toward the tank now secured in the aircraft's cargo hold. "We've got a long flight ahead, and I want everyone rested before we insert." The 16-hour flight passed in a blur of final planning sessions, equipment checks, and brief periods of restless sleep. The C-17's cargo bay was cold and noisy, but for soldiers accustomed to far worse conditions, it was manageable. William spent much of the time with his original tank crew, Jackson, Rivera, and Chen, reviewing the specifics of operating in the terrain they would face. The old Warhorse had performed admirably at Rockwell, but the conditions they would encounter in Pakistan would be far more demanding. The approach through the riverbed gives us good cover, but limits our mobility, he explained, pointing to the detailed terrain map they had constructed. We'll need to maintain track tension for the loose gravel and be ready for rapid deployment once we reach this point. Jackson studied the map with the experienced eye of a senior NCO. Elevation changes are significant in the final stretch, sir. That puts stress on the engine cooling system. We've prepared for that, Robert interjected, joining their discussion. The tank has been modified with enhanced cooling and filtration systems for desert operations. It should handle the terrain. As they continued reviewing the tactical approach, William was struck by the seamless way his and Robert's teams had integrated, the tank crew veterans meshing with the special operations personnel to create a unified force despite their different backgrounds and specialties. Perhaps that was the true strength of their hastily assembled team. They were all fighting for something beyond orders or duty. They were fighting for brothers abandoned by the system that should have protected them, for the truth that powerful men had tried to bury, for principles that transcended politics and chains of command. In the final hours before their arrival, William gathered the entire team for a last briefing. 20 men and 2 women stood in a tight circle in the cargo bay, illuminated by the aircraft's harsh lighting, the massive silhouette of the Abrams looming behind them like a steel guardian. In 4 hours, we insert into hostile territory, William began, his voice carrying the weight of command that had led men into battle for decades. Our mission is clear. Locate and extract American personnel being illegally detained by Helix Global Security. Intelligence suggests at least 3 surviving members of Operation Scorpion are being held at the facility. He paused, making eye contact with each team member. This is not an authorized military operation. We are not representing the United States Army or any branch of government. Each of you is here voluntarily, understanding the risks and potential consequences. What we are doing, he continued, his voice hardening, is upholding the oath we all took, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith in allegiance to the same, and to never leave a fallen comrade behind. Nods of solemn agreement passed through the assembled team. These weren't mercenaries or glory seekers. They were professionals who understood exactly what was at stake. The tank will lead the assault, creating a diversion at the main gate and suppressing defensive positions, William outlined. Simultaneously, the extraction team led by Major Harrington will breach the southeast perimeter, locate the prisoners, and move them to the designated extraction point. He gestured to the map displayed on a tactical board. Timing is critical. From initiation of the assault, we have a 30-minute window before Helix can mobilize reinforcements from their main facility 60 miles south. Our extraction vehicles will be waiting here, 5 miles from the target, ready to move as soon as the prisoners are secured. Robert stepped forward. Communications will be maintained on encrypted channels, with fallback protocols established if primary comms are compromised. Each team has memorized the extraction routes and rally points. If any element becomes separated, proceed to the nearest rally point and wait for extraction. William took a final look at the assembled team, a mixture of veterans from his generation and younger operators from Robert's. Different backgrounds, different specialties, but united in purpose. 3 years ago, 8 American soldiers were betrayed by the very people they trusted to lead them, he concluded. Today, we have the chance to bring some of them home, to let the world know what happened to them, and to ensure that those responsible face justice for their actions. He straightened to his full height, his bearing that of the commander he had always been. Whatever happens in the next few hours, remember why we're here. Remember the men we're fighting for. And remember that sometimes doing what's right means standing against orders that are wrong. The team dispersed to make final preparations as the aircraft began its descent toward the remote airstrip where they would make their final transition to ground transport. William remained by the tank, taking a moment alone with the machine that had carried him through so many battles. His hand rested on the cold steel of the hull, feeling the familiar contours that had been part of his life for so long. The old Warhorse had never failed him, from the burning oil fields of Kuwait to the desperate fight at Rockwell Ridge. Now it would carry him into one final battle, perhaps his last. "Sir," Jackson's voice interrupted his thoughts. 2 minutes to landing. Time to secure for touchdown. William nodded, moving to take his position for landing. As he strapped in, he caught Robert's eye across the cargo bay. His son gave him a nod of quiet confidence, not just soldier to soldier, but son to father. In that simple gesture was acknowledgement of all they had shared and all they had sacrificed. Whatever happened in the hours ahead, they would face it together. The C-17 descended toward the darkened runway, carrying its unusual cargo toward a confrontation that would change the course of many lives, and perhaps, in some small way, restore honor to a system that had betrayed its most loyal servants. Colonel William Harrington closed his eyes briefly, centering in himself for the battle to come. When he opened them again, his gaze was clear and focused. The soldier who had commanded tanks across the battlefields of 3 wars was ready for one final mission. Operation Iron Fortress had begun.